Welcome back to the mess. Oh boy. No, wait. Release. Personal space. Okay, so, I just went and set up for the UFO exhibition convention. I don't have enough product. If I don't have enough product for a little convention, how am I going to fill the gallery on Sunday? I'm fucked. Ah! My own fault. I knew better. But depression doesn't care if you know better. Anyway, so I got it all set up, brought some of my wall art out, and I'm just going to sit here and see if I can make a couple of bats tonight, and yeah, I had to work today, so anyway, I wasn't going to live stream, but we're here. So let's continue on with the Dracula. I'm starting to get it on the run now. We'll be listening to it again at 1.25 speed, so we can get through it in a few less hours. I like his reading style, but it's a little bit too long and breathy for me when I am trying to put words behind us. So, yes. Ooh. Do. History. History. And the thunder. Feel the thunder. Lightning and the thunder. Do. I watched a lot of shit today, but where is Dracula? Do. So close. Good. Here we are. Alrighty. I should put the link to the one I'm listening to. Hello! Welcome to the live stream. We're just getting started tonight.
For even more beauty, shop now at shoppersdrugmart.ca.
I took my way to Paddington,
There
where
we
I
go.
arrived about 15 minutes before the train came.
There we go.
The crowd had melted away.
We're
Traffic
on
bustling fashion
chapter
coloured for arrival platforms.
70?
I was beginning to feel uneasy, lest I might miss my guess. A sweet-faced, dainty-looking girl stepped up to me, and after a quick glance, said, "Dr. Seward, is it not? And you are Mrs. Harker," I answered at once, whereupon she held out her hand. "I knew you from the description of poor dear Lucy, but..." She stopped suddenly. A quick blush overspread her face. The blush that rose to my own cheeks somehow set us both at ease, for it was a tacit answer to her own. I got her luggage, which included a typewriter, and we took the underground to Fenchurch Street. After I had sent a wire to my housekeeper to have a sitting room and bedroom prepared at once for me. In due time, we arrived. She knew I could see that she was unable to repress a slight shudder when we entered. She told me that, if she might, she would come presently to my study, as she had much to say. So here I am finishing my entry in my phonograph diary whilst I await her. As yet I've not had the chance of looking at the papers which Van Helsing left with me, but they lie open before me. I have an opportunity of reading her. She does not know how precious time is, or what a task we have in hand. I must be careful not to frighten her. Here she is. Mina Harker's journal. 29th of September. After I had tidied myself, I went down to Dr. Seward's study. At the door, I paused a moment, and I thought I heard him talking with someone. He had pressed me to be quick. I knocked at the door, eyes calling out, "Come in." I entered. To my intense surprise, there was no one with him. He was quite alone. And on the table opposite him was what I knew at once from the description: a phonograph. I had never seen one, and was much interested. "I hope I did not keep you waiting," I said. "But I stayed at the door as I heard you talking, and I thought there was someone with you." "Oh," he replied with a smile. "A diary?" I exclaimed in surprise. "I keep it in this." As he spoke, he laid his hand on the phonograph. I felt quite excited over it and blurted out, "Why, this beats even shorthand. May I hear it say so?" "Certainly," he replied with alacrity, and stood up to put in train for speaking. Then he paused, and a troubled look overspread his face. The fact is, he began awkwardly, I only keep my diary in it. And it is entirely, almost entirely, but my cases. Very awkward, that is, I mean. He stopped, and I tried to help him out of his embarrassment. He had to attempt to do something. Let me hear how she died. With all that I can know of her, I should be very grateful. She was very, very good. To my surprise, he answered, with a horror-struck look in his face. Tell you of her death. Not for the wide world. Why not? I asked. For some grave, terrible feeling was coming over me. Again he paused, and I could see that he was very nervous. At length he stammered out, I don't know how to pick out any particular part of the diary.
God fucking damn it.
While he was speaking, an idea dawned upon him, and he said, with unconscious simplicity, in a different voice and with the naivety of a child, That's quite true, upon my honour. Honest Indian. I could not but smile, at which I gave myself away at that time. Well, I kept the diary for months past. It never once struck me how I was going to find any particular part of it in case I wanted to look it up. By this time, my mind was made up that the diary of a doctor who attended Lucy might have something to add to the sum of our knowledge of that terrible being. And I said, boldly, "Then, Dr. Seward,
Hello.
you'd better let me copy it out for you on my typewriter." He grew to a positively deathly pallor as he said. He grew to a positively pallor as he said. All the world, I would let you know that terrible story. Then it was terrible. My intuition was right. For a moment I thought. And as my eyes ranged the room, unconsciously looking for something or some opportunity to aid me, they lit on a great batch of typewriting on the table. His eyes caught the look in mine, and without his sight. As they saw the parcel, we realized my meaning. "You do not know me," I said. "When you have read those papers, my own diary and my husband's also, which I have typed, you will know me better. I have not faltered in giving every thought of my own heart in this case. But, of course, you do not know me. Yet. It's not exactly interesting, sir. He is certainly a noble man. I stood up and opened a large drawer, in which were arranged in order a number of hollow cylinders of metal covered with dark wax, and said, "You are quite right. I did not trust you because I did not know you. But I know you now. And let me say that I should have known you long ago. I know that Lucy told you of me. She told me of you too. May I make the only atonement in my power? Take the cylinders, and here. The first half dozen of them are personal to me, and they will not horrify you. Then you will know me better. Dinner will be by then ready. In the meantime, I shall read over some of these documents, and shall be better able to understand certain things." He carried the phonograph himself up to my sitting room, and adjusted it for me. Now I shall learn something pleasant, I'm sure. For it will tell me the other side of a true love episode, which I know one side already. Dr. Seward's diary, 29th of September. I was so absorbed in that wonderful diary of Jonathan Harker and that other of his wife that I let the time run on without thinking. Mrs. Harker was not down when the maid came to announce dinner, so I said, "She's possibly tired. Let dinner wait an hour." I went on with my work. I had just finished Mrs. Harker's diary when she came in. She looked sweetly pretty, but very sad, and her eyes were flushed with crying. This somehow moved me much. Of late I have had cause for tears, God knows, but the relief of them was denied me. And now the sight of those sweet eyes, brightened with recent tears, went straight to my heart. So I said, as gently as I could, "I greatly fear I have distressed you." "Oh, no, not distressed me," she replied, "but I have been more touched than I can say by your grief. There's a wonderful machine, but it is cruelly true. It told me in its very tones the anguish of your heart. It was like a soul crying out to Almighty God. No one must hear them spoken ever again. See, I have tried to be useful. I have put down the words on my typewriter, and none other need now hear your heart beat, as I did." No one need ever know. Shall ever know, I said in a low voice. She laid her hand on mine and said very gravely, "But they must. Must. But why?" I asked. "Because it is a part of the terrible story. A part of poor dear Lucy's death and all that led to it. Because, in the struggle which we have before us to rid the earth of this terrible monster, we must have all the knowledge, all the help which we can get. I think that the cylinders which you gave me contained more than you intended me to know, but I can see that there are in your record many lights to this dark mystery. Will it be help? How poor Lucy was misled, and how her terrible tragedy was told. Jonathan and I have been working day and night since Professor Van Helsing saw us. He has gone to Whitby to get more information, and he will be here tomorrow to help us. We need have no secrets amongst us.
Fucked up.
Working together, but with
They fucked up.
we can surely be stronger than if some of us were
Gone upside down.
And at the same time manifested such courage and resolution in her bearing that I gave in at once to her wishes. You shall,
Damn it.
I said. Do as you like in the matter. God forgive me if I do wrong. There are terrible things yet to learn of. But if you have so far travelled on the road to poor Lucy's death, you will not be content, I know, to remain in the dark. And anyway, the end, the very end, may give you a gleam of peace. Come, there is dinner. We must keep one another strong for what is before us. We have a cruel and dreadful task. When you have eaten, we shall learn the rest, and I shall answer any questions you ask. If there be anything which you do not understand, though it was apparent to us who were present. Mina Hanno, 29th of September. After dinner, I came with Dr. Seward to his study. He brought back the phonograph from my room and I took my typewriter. He placed me in a comfortable chair and arranged the phonograph so that I could touch it without getting up. He showed me how to stop it in case I should want to pause. Then he very thoughtfully took a chair with his back to me so that I might be as free as possible and began to read. I put the forked metal to my ears and listened.
Oh, stupid.
But the terrible story of Lucy's death and all that followed was done.
There we go.
I lay back in my chair, powerless. Fortunately, I'm not of a fainting disposition. When Dr. Seward saw me, he jumped up with a horrified exclamation and, hurriedly taking a case bottle from a cupboard, gave me some brandy.
Brandy cures everything. Everyone gets brandy. You're dying, give them brandy.
And only that I came through all the multitude of horrors, the holy ray of light that my dear Lucy was at last at peace. I do not think I could have borne it without making a scene. It's all so wild and mysterious and strange.
Again.
If I had not known Jonathan's experience in Pennsylvania, as it was, I didn't know. So my difficulty by
Shouldn't be banging.
I took the cover off my typewriter and said to Dr. Seward, "Let me write this all out now. We must be ready for Dr. Van Helsing when he comes. I've sent a telegram to Jonathan to come on here when he arrives in London from Whitby. In this matter needs are everything, and I think that if we get all our material ready and have every item put in chronological order, we shall have done much. You tell me that Lord Goldenby and Mr. Wilkes are coming too. Let us be able to tell them when they come."
See if this will help any.
He accordingly took the phonograph. 7th cylinder. I used it and so took 3 copies of the diary, just as I had done with all the rest. It was late when I got through, but Dr. Seward went about his work of going his round of the patient.
Hopefully that'll be.
When he had finished, he came back and sat near me reading, so that I did not feel too lonely whilst I worked.
Pants up. Here we go.
Good and thoughtful he is. The world seems full of good men, even if there are monsters in it.
Okay, I'm gonna need this
Before I
one.
left him, I remembered what Jonathan had in his diary of the professor's perturbation at reading something in the evening paper at the station at Exeter.
There we go.
So, seeing that Dr. Seward keeps his newspapers, I borrowed files of the Westminster Gazette and the Pall Mall Gazette and took them to my room. I remember how much the Telegraph and the Whitby Gazette, of which I had made cuttings, helped us to understand the terrible events of Whitby when Count Dracula landed. So I shall look through the evening papers since then. Perhaps I shall get some new light. I'm not sleepy, and the work will help to keep me quiet. Dr. Seward's diary, 30th of September. Mr. Harker arrived at 9 o'clock. He had got his wife wine just before starting. He's clever, if you can judge his face, and full of energy. If it's generally true, and judging by one's own wonderful experiences, it must be. He's also a man of great nerve. That going down to the vault a second time was a remarkable piece of daring. After reading his account of it, I was prepared to meet a good specimen of manhood, but hardly the quiet, business-like gentleman who came here today. Later.
Later.
After lunch, Harker and his wife went back to their own room. And as I passed a while ago, I heard the click of the typewriter. They are hard at it. Mrs. Harker says that they are knitting together in chronological order every scrap of evidence they have. Harker has got the letters between the consignee of the letters at Whitby and the carriers in London who took charge of them. He is now reading his wife's typescript of my diary. I wonder what they make out of it. Here. Strange that it never struck me that the very next house might be a cat's hiding place. Goodness knows that they had enough use for a identification of the cat. But the letters related to the purchase of the house were in the typescript. If they'd only had them early, we might have saved poor Lucy. Stop. That way madness lies. Harker has gone back, and is again collating his material. He says that by dinner time they will be able to show a whole connected narrative. He thinks that in the meantime I should see Renfrew, as hitherto he has been a sort of index to the coming and going of the Count. I hardly see this yet, but when I get to the dates, I suppose I shall. What a good thing that Mrs. Harker put my cylinders into type. I never could have found dates otherwise. I found Renfield sitting placidly in his room, with his hands folded, smiling benignly. At the moment, he seemed as sane as anyone I ever saw. I sat down and talked to him on a lot of subjects, all of which he treated naturally. Then, with his own accord, spoke of a subject he's never mentioned to my knowledge during this situation. In fact, he spoke quite confidently of getting his discharge at once. I believe that, had I not had the chat with Harker and read the letters and the dates of his outbursts, I should have been prepared to sign for him after a brief time of observation. As it is, very darkly suspicious. All those outbreaks were in some way linked with the proximity of the Count. What then does this absolute content mean? Can it be that his instinct is satisfied as to the vampire's ultimate triumph? Stay. He is himself so Vegas. And in his wild raving outside the chapel door of the deserted house, he always spoke of Master. This all seems confirmation of our idea. However, after a while I came away. My friend is just a little too sane at present to make it safe to probe him too deep with questions. He might begin to think, and then... So I came away. I mistrust these quiet moods of his, so I've given the attendant a hint to look closely after him, and have a straight waistcoat ready in case of need.
Oopsie.
Jonathan Harker's journal, 29th of September, in train to London. When I received Mr. Billington's courteous message that he would give me any information in his power, I thought it best to go down to Whitby and make, on the spot, such inquiries as I wanted.
That's the
It
problem.
was now my object to trace that horrid cargo of the Count's to its place in London. Later, we may be able to deal with it. Clinton Jr., a nice lad, met me at the station, and brought me to his father's house, and they decided I would stay there. They are hospitable, with true Yorkshire hospitality. Give a guest everything and leave him free to do as he adores. They all knew that I was busy, but my stay was short. Mr. Billington had ready in his office all the papers concerning the consignment of boxes. It almost returned to see again one of the letters which I had seen on the Count's table, chemical plans. Everything had been carefully thought out, and done systematically and with precision. He seemed to have been prepared for every obstacle which might be placed by accident in the way of his intentions being carried out. To use an Americanism, He had taken no chances, and the absolute accuracy with which his instructions were fulfilled was simply the logical result of his care. I saw the invoice and took note of it. 50 cases of common earth to be used for experimental purposes. Also, the copy of the letter to Carter Peterson and their reply. Of both of these, I got copies. This was all the information Mr. Billington could give me. So I went down to the port and saw the Coast Guards, the customs officers, and the harbour master.
The harbour
I had
master
also to say of the
too.
strange entry of the ship, which was already taking its place in local tradition. But no one could add to the simple description. 50 cases of common earth. I then saw the station master, who kindly put me in communication with the men who had actually received the boxes. Their tally was exact with the list, and they had nothing to add except that the boxes were men and mortal heavy, and that shifting them was dry work. One of them added that it was hard lines that there wasn't any gentleman, such like as yourself, Squire, to show some support and appreciation of their efforts in a liquid form. Another put in a rider that the thirst then generated was such that even the time which had elapsed had not completely allayed. Needless to add, I took care before leaving to lift, forever and adequately, this source of reproach. 30th of September. The station master was good enough to give me a line to his old companion, the station master at King's Cross, so that when I arrived there in the morning, I was able to ask him about the order of the boxes. He, too, put me at once in communication with the proper officials, and I saw that their tally was correct with the original invoice. The opportunities of acquiring an abnormal thirst had been here limited, but no more use of them had. I was compelled to deal with the result in an ex post facto manner. From thence I went into the central office, where I met with the utmost courtesy. They went to the daybook and letterbook. Once, I went to their King's Cross office for more details. By good fortune, they shot at once and an order, sending also by one of them the waybill and all the papers connected with the delivery of the boxes at Carfax. Here again I found the tally agreeing exactly. The carrier's men were able to supplement the paucity of the written words with a few details. These were, I shortly found, connected almost solely with the dusty nature of the job, and of the consequent thirst engendered in the operators. On my affording an opportunity, through the medium of the currency of the realm, of the allaying, at a later period, this magnificent evil, one of the men remarked, "That here house, Governor, is the rammiest I've ever in. Blimey, but it ain't been touched since 100 years. There was dust that thick in the place that you might have slept on it without hurting of your bones, and the place was that neglected that you might have smelled old Jerusalem here. But the old chapel, that took their side, that did. Me and my mate, we thought we would never get out quick enough. It won't take less nor a quarter moment to stay there after dark." Having been in the house, I could well believe him. But if he knew what I know, he would, I think, have raised his terms. Of one thing I am now satisfied, that all the boxes which arrived at the garden were safely deposited in the Carfax. There should be 50 of them there,
Why is it not
unless any
moving?
missing's been removed, as from Dr. Seuss said. I shall try to see the carter who took away the boxes from Carfax when Renfield attacked them. If following up this clue, we may learn a good deal. Later,
Later.
Mina and I have worked all day, and we've put all the papers into order. Mina Harker's journal, 30th of September. I'm so glad that I hardly know how to contain myself. It is, I suppose, the reaction from the haunting fear which I have had. That this terrible affair and the reopening of his old wound might act detrimentally on Jonathan. I saw him leave for Whitby with as brave a face as I could, but I was sick with apprehension. The effort has, however, done him good. He was never so resolute, never so strong, never so full of volcanic energy as at present. It is just as that dear good Professor Van Helsing said. He is true grit, and he improves under strain that would kill a weaker nature. He came back full of life and hope and determination. We've got everything in order for tonight. I feel myself quite wild with excitement. I suppose one ought to pity anything so hunted as is the Count. That is just it. This thing is not human, not even beast. To read Dr. Seward's account of poor Lucy's death and what followed is enough to dry up the springs of pity in one's heart. Later. Lord Godalming and Mr. Morris arrived earlier than we expected. Dr. Seward was out on business and had taken Jonathan with him, so I had to see them. It was to me a painful meeting, for it brought back old poor dear Lucy's hopes of only a few months ago. Of course, they had heard Lucy speak of me, and it seemed that Dr. Van Helsing too has been quite blowing my trumpet, as Mr. Morris expressed it. Poor fellows. I was aware that I know all about the proposals they made to Lucy. They did not quite know what to say or do, as they were ignorant of the amount of my knowledge, so they had to keep on neutral subjects. However, I thought the matter over and came to the conclusion that the best thing I could do would be to post them in affairs right up to date. I knew from Dr. Seward's diary that they had been at Lucy's death, her real death, and that I need not fear to betray any secret before the time. So I told them, as well as I could, that I had read all the papers and diaries and that my husband and I, having typewritten them, had just finished putting them in order. I gave them each a copy to read in the library. When Lord Godalming got his and turned it over, it does make a pretty good pile. He said, "Did you write all this, Mrs. Harker?" I nodded, and he went on. "I don't quite see the drift of it. But you people are all so good and kind and have been working so earnestly and so energetically that all I can do is to accept your ideas blindfold and try to help you. I've had one lesson already in accepting facts that should make a man humble to the last hour of his life. Besides, I know you loved my poor Lucy." Here he turned away and covered his face with his hands. I could hear the tears in his voice. Mr. Morris, with his instinctive delicacy, just laid a hand for a moment on his shoulder and then walked quietly out of the room. I suppose there is something in woman's nature that makes a man free to break down before her and express his feelings on the tender or emotional side without feeling it derogatory to his manhood.
Ow.
When Lord Godalming found himself alone with me, he sat down on the sofa.
All right.
and gave way
Well, that didn't quite work.
openly.
I thought they were done, but they're
I
not.
sat down beside him and took his hand.
Oh, my feet.
I hope he didn't think it forward of me, and if he ever thinks
Ooh,
of it
my feet are cold.
afterwards, he never will have such a thought.
All right.
Then I wrong him. I know he never will. He's too true a gentleman. I said to him, for I could see that his heart was breaking, "I loved dear Lucy, and I know what she was to you, and what you were to her. She and I were like sisters, and now she is gone. Will you not let me be like a sister to you in your trouble? I know what sorrows you have had, though I cannot measure the depth of them. If sympathy and pity can help in your affliction, would you let me be of some little service? For Lucy's sake." In an instant, the poor dear fellow was overwhelmed with grief. It seemed to me that all that he had of late been suffering in silence found a vent at once. He grew quite hysterical, and raising his open hands, beat his palms together in a perfect agony of grief. He stood up and then sat down again, and the tears rained down his cheeks. I felt an infinite pity for him and opened my arms unthinkingly. With a sob, he laid his head on my shoulder and cried like a wearied child, whilst he shook with emotion. We women have something of the mother in us that makes us rise above small matters when the mother's spirit is invoked.
Men writing women on
I felt this
the
big,
actually
solid man's head resting on me as though it were that of the baby that someday may lie on my bosom. And I stroked his hair as though he were my own child. I never thought at the time how strange it all was. After a little bit his sob ceased, and he raised himself with an apology, though he made no disguise of his emotion. He told me that the days and nights past, weary days and sleepless nights, he'd been unable to speak with anyone, as a man must speak in his time of sorrow. No one whose sympathy could be given to him, or with whom, owing to the circumstance, his sorrow surrounded. "I know now how I suffered," he said as he dried his eyes, "but I do not know even yet. No one can ever know how much your sweet sympathy has been to me today. I shall know better in time, and believe me that although I'm not ungrateful. My gratitude
going on?
will grow with my understanding.
What's happening with my
You
sewing
will let me
machine?
be like a brother, looking well, in all our lives. For dear Lucy's sake. For dear Lucy's sake, I said as we clasped hands. Aye, and for your own sake, he added. For if a man's esteem and gratitude are ever worth the winning, you have won mine today. If ever the future should bring to you a time when you need a man's help, believe me, you will not call in vain. God grant that no such time may ever come to you to break the sunshine of your life, but if it should ever come, promise me that you will let me know. He was so earnest, and his sorrow was so fresh, that I felt it would comfort him. So I said, I promise. As I came along the corridor, I saw Mr. Morris looking out of the window. He turned as he heard my footsteps. They always are. Then, noticing my red eyes, he went on. I see you've been comforting him. Poor old fellow, he needs it. No one but a woman can help a man when he's in trouble of the heart. And he had no one to comfort him. He bore his own trouble so bravely that my heart bled for him. I saw the manuscript in his hand, and I knew that when he read it, he would realize how much I knew. So I said to him, I wish I could comfort all who suffer from the heart. Will you let me be your friend, and will you come to me for comfort if you need it? You will know later on why I speak. He saw that I was in earnest, and stooping, took my hand, and raising it to his lips, kissed it. It seemed but poor comfort to so brave and unselfish a soul, and impulsively I bent over and kissed him. The tears rose in his eyes, and there was a momentary choking in his throat. He said quite calmly, Little girl, you'll never regret that true-hearted kindness. So long as ever you live. And he wanted to step to his friend. Little girl. The very words he had used to Lucy, and would he prove himself a friend?
You made the notification, Town. Tell me what's up. Angry Pianist is here to sign another chapter done.
Chapter 18. Dr. Seward's Diary. 30th of September. I got home at 5 a.m. I found that Golding and Morris were I studied the transcript of the various diaries and letters which Harker and his wonderful wife had made and arranged. Harker had not yet returned from his visit to the carrier's men, of whom Dr. Hennessy had written to me. Mrs. Harker gave us a cup of tea, and I can honestly say that for the first time since I have lived in it, this old house seemed like home. When we had finished, Mrs. Harker said, Dr. Seward, I will ask a favour. Mr. Renfield, do I see him? What you have said in your diary interests me so much. She looked so appealing and so pretty that I could not refuse her.
I don't know why that
There was
does
no
that.
possible reason why I should. So I took her with me. When I went into the room, I told the man that a lady would like to see him, to which he simply answered, Why? She's going through the house and wants to see everyone in it, I answered. Oh, very well, he said. But just wait a minute till I tidy up the place. His method of tidying is peculiar. He simply swallowed all the flies and spiders in the boxes before I could stop him. It was quite evident that he feared, or was jealous of, some interference. When he had got through his disgusting task, he said cheerfully, Let the lady come in, and sat down on the edge of his bed with his head down, but with his eyelids raised so that he could see her as she entered. For a moment I thought that he might have some homicidal intent. I remembered how quiet he had been just before he attacked me in my own study, and I took care to stand where I could seize him at once if he attempted to make a spring at her. She came into the room with an easy gracefulness which He would at once command the respect of any lunatic. For easiness is one of the qualities mad people most respect. She walked over to him, smiling pleasantly, and held out her hand. "Good evening, Mr. Renfield," said she. "You see, I know you, for Dr. Seward has told me of you." He made no immediate reply, but eyed her all over intently with a set frown on his face. This look gave way to one of wonder, which merged in doubt. Then, to my intense astonishment, he said, "You're not the girl the doctor wanted to marry, are you?" "Yeah, you can't be, you know, for she's dead." Mrs. Harker smiled sweetly as she replied, "Oh, no, I have a husband of my own, to whom I was married before I ever saw Dr. Seward or he me. I am Mrs. Harker. Then what are you doing here?" "My husband and I are staying on a visit with Dr. Seward." "Then don't stay." "But why not?" I thought that this style of conversation might not be pleasant to Mrs. Harker, any more than it was to me, so I joined in. "How did you know I wanted to marry anyone?" His reply was simply contemptuous, given in a pause in which he turned his eyes from Mrs. Harker to me, instantly turning them back again. "What an asinine question!" "I don't see that at all, Mr. Renfield," said Mrs. Harker, at once championing me. He replied to her with as much courtesy and respect as he had shown contempt to me. "You will, of course, understand, Mrs. Harker, that when a man is so loved and honoured as our host is, everything regarding him is of interest in our little community. Dr. Seward is loved not only by his household and his friends, but even by his patients, who, being some of them hardly in mental equilibrium, are apt to distort causes and effects. Since I myself have been an inmate of the lunatic asylum, I cannot but notice that the sophistic tendencies of some of its inmates lean towards the errors of non-cause and ignoratio elenchi. I positively opened my eyes to this. I was pronounced this time elemental philosophy. With a matter of hellish gentle. I wonder if it was Mrs. Harker's presence which had touched some chord in his memory. If this new phase was spontaneous, or in any way due to her unconscious influence, she must have some rare gift or power. We continued to talk for some time, and seeing that he was seemingly quite reasonable, she ventured, looking at me questioningly as she began, to lead him to his favourite topic. I was again astonished, but he addressed himself to the question with the impartiality of the completest sanity. He even took himself as an example when he mentioned certain things. "Why, I myself am an instance of a man who has a strange belief. Indeed, it was no wonder that my friends were alarmed and insisted on my being put under control. I used to fancy that life was a positive and perpetual entity, and that by consuming a multitude of live things, no matter how low in the scale of creation, one might indefinitely prolong life. At times, I held the belief so strongly that I actually tried to take human life. The doctor here will bear me out that on one occasion I tried to kill him for the purpose of strengthening my vital powers by the simulation of my own body, of his life, through the medium of his blood. Relying, of course, upon the scriptural phrase, "For the blood is the life." Though indeed the vendor of a certain nostrum has vulgarized the truism to the very point of contempt. Isn't that true, Doctor? I nodded assent. I was so amazed that I hardly knew what either think or say. It was hard to imagine that I had seen him eat of his spies of life for 5 minutes before. Looking at my watch, I was not actually going to the station to meet Van Helsing, so I told Miss Harker that it was time to leave. She came at once. After saying pleasantly to Mr. Renfield, "Goodbye, and I hope I may see you often, when your auspice is pleasanter to yourself." To which, to my astonishment, he replied, "I pray God I may never see your sweet face again. May he bless and keep you." When I went to the station to meet Van Helsing, I left the boys behind me. It seemed more truthful than he has been since he first appeared. And Quincy is more like his own bright self than he has been for many a day. Van Helsing stepped from the carriage with the eager nimbleness of a boy. He saw me at once and rushed up to me, saying, "Ah, friend John, how goes all?" "Well, so I have been busy, but I've come here to stay, if need be. All affairs are settled with me, and I have much to tell. Mina is with you. Yes, and her so fine husband. And Arthur and my friend Quincy, they are with you too. Good." As I drove to the house, I told her of what had passed, and of how my diary had proved to be of some use news for Mrs. Hutchins' suggestion, which the professor interrupted me. Ah, wonderful Madame Pinker. She has man's brains, a brain that a man should have were he much lifted, and woman's heart. The good God fashioned her for a purpose, believe me, when he made that so good combination. And John, up to now, fortune has made that woman of helpless. After tonight, she must not have to do with this so terrible affair. Not good that she ran a risk so great. We men are determined, nay, are we not pledged, to destroy this monster? But it is no part for a woman. Even if she not be harmed, her heart may fail her in so much and so many horrors, and hereafter she may suffer, both in waking from her nerves and in sleep from her dreams. And besides, she is a young woman and not so long married. There may be other things to think of sometime, if not now. You tell me she has wrote all, then she must consult with us. But tomorrow she say goodbye to this work and we go alone. I agreed heartily with him, and then I told him what we had found in his absence. That the house which Dracula had bought was the very next one to my own. He was amazed, and a great concern seemed to come on him. Oh, that we had known it before, he said. For then we might have reached him in time to save poor Lucy. However, the milk that is spilt cries not out afterwards, as you say.
No crying over spilled
I
milk?
shall not think of that.
Dude, did he just say
On
that?
our way.
Did he just say like a... Okay.
He fell into a silence that lasted till we entered my own gateway.
I don't know why it's not pulling.
And my friend John. Up to this moment. Not up to this moment, Professor, she said impulsively. But up to this morning. We have seen hitherto how good light all the little things do. We have told our secrets, and yet no one knows to hold them us. Mrs. Harker began to blush, and taking a look, she said, Dr. Van Helsing, will you read this and tell me if it is clear? This is our record of today. I too have seen it, however trivial. Mr. Garland, the professor read it over gravely, and handed it back, saying, It need not go in if you do not wish it, but I pray that it may. It can but make your husband love you the more. And us, your friends, more honor you, as well as more esteem and love. She took with a bright smile. And so now, up to this very hour, all the records we have are complete and in order. The professor took away one copy to study after dinner, and before our meeting. So when we meet in the study, we shall all be informed as to facts. We can arrange our plan of battle. This terrible, mysterious enemy. 30th of September. Yes, 2 hours after dinner, which had been at 6 o'clock. She had formed a sort of board or committee. Professor Van Helsing took the head of the table, to which Dr. Seward motioned me to enter the room. He made me sit next to him and Dr. Secretary. Jonathan sat next to me. Opposite us were Dr. Seward and Mr. White, Lord Godalming being next to the Professor and Dr. Seward in the centre. The Professor said, I may, I suppose, we are all acquainted with the facts that are in these videos. We all expressed assent, and he went on. Then it were, I think good that I tell you something of the kind of enemy with which we have to deal. I shall then make known to you something of the history of this man, which has been ascertained for me. Taking our measure accordingly. There are such beings as vampires. Some of us have evidence that they exist. Even had we not the proof of our own unhappy experience, the teachings and the records of the past give proof enough the same peoples. I admit that at first I was skeptic. Were it not that through long years I have trained myself to keep an open mind, I could not have believed until such time as that fact thunder on my ear. See, I prove. Alas, had I known at the first what now I know, nay, had I even guessed at him, One so precious life had been spared for many of us who did love her. But that is gone, and we must so work that other poor souls perish not, whilst we can save. The Nosferatu do not die like the bee when he sting once. He is only stronger, and being stronger, have yet more power to work evil. This vampire which is amongst us is of himself so strong in person as 20 men. He is of cunning more than mortal, for his cunning be the growth of ages. He hath still the aids of necromancy, which is, as his etymology imply, the divination by the dead, and all the dead that he can come nigh to after him at command. He is brute, and more than brute. He is devil and callous, and the heart of him is not. He can, within limitations, appear at will when and where, and in any of the forms that are to him. He can, within his range, direct the elements. The storm, the fog, the thunder. He can command all the meaner things. The rat and the owl and the bat. The moth and the fox and the wolf. He can grow and become small. And he can at times vanish and come unknown. How then are we to begin our strife to destroy him? How shall we find his where? And having found it, how can we destroy? My friends, this is much. It is a terrible task that we undertake, and there may be consequence to make the brave shudder. But if we fail in this our fight, we must surely win. And then where end we? Life is nothing. I heed him not. But to fail here is not mere life or death. It is that we become as him. That we henceforward become foul things of the night like him. Without heart or conscience, preying on the bodies and the souls of those we love best. To us, forever, are the gates of heaven shut, for who shall open them to us again? We go on for all time, abhorred by all, a blot on the face of God's sunshine, an arrow in the side of him who died for men.
God, he's long-winded. Get to the point!
Face to face with duty, and in such case must we shrink. For me, I say no. For then I am old, and life, with his sunshine, his fair places, his song of birds, his music, and his love, lie far behind. You others are young. Some have seen sorrow, but there are fair days yet in store. What say you? Whilst he was speaking, Jonathan had taken my hand. I feared, oh so much, that the appalling nature of our danger was overcoming him when I saw his hand stretch out. But it was life to me to feel its touch. So strong, so self-reliant, so resolute. A brave man's hand can speak for itself. It does not even need a woman's love to hear its music.
God!
The professor had done speaking. My husband looked in my eyes, and I in his. There was no need for speaking between us. I answer for Mina and myself, he said. Count me in, Professor, said Mr. Quincy Morris, laconically as usual. I am with you, said Lord Godalming, for Lucid's sake, if for no other reason. Dr. Seward simply nodded. The professor stood up, and after laying his golden crucifix on the table, held out his hand on either side. I took his right hand, and Lord Godalming his left. Jonathan held my right with his left and stretched across to Mr. Morris. So as we all took hands, our solemn compact was made. I felt my heart icy cold, but it did not even occur to me to draw back. We resumed our places, and Dr. Van Helsing went on with a sort of cheerfulness which showed that the serious work had begun. It was to be taken as gravely and in as businesslike a way as any other transaction of life. Well, you know what we have to contend against. But we, too, are not without strength. We have on our side power of combination, a power denied to the vampire kind. We have resources of science. We are free to act and think, and the hours of the day and the night are ours equally. In fact, so far as our powers extend, they are unfettered, and we are free to use them. We have self-devotion in a cause, and an end to achieve, which is not a selfish one. These things are much. Now, Let us see how far the general powers arrayed against us are restrict, and how the individual cannot. In fine, let us consider the limitations of the vampire in general, and of this one in particular. All we have to go upon are traditions and superstitions. These do not at the first appear much, and the matter is one of life and death. Nay, more than either life or death, yet we must be satisfied, in the first place because we have to be. No other means is at our control. And secondly, because after all these things, tradition and superstition, are everything. Does not the belief in vampires rest for others, though not, alas for us, on them? A year ago, which of us would have received such a possibility in the midst of our scientific, matter-of-fact 19th century? We even scouted a belief that we saw justified under our very eyes. Take it, then, that the vampire, and the belief in his limitations and his cure, rest for the moment on the same base. For, let me tell you, he is known everywhere that men have been. In old Greece, in old Rome, he flourished in Germany all over, in France, in India, even in the Chersonese, and in China. So far from us in all ways, there even he is, there even is he, and the people fear him at this day. Here follow the wake of the Berserker Icelander, the devil-begotten Hun, the Slav, the Saxon, the Magyar. So far, then, we have all we may act upon. And let me tell you that very much of the beliefs are justified by what we have seen in our own so unhappy experience. The vampire live on and cannot die, but mere passing of the time. He can flourish when that he can fatten on the blood of the living. Even more, we have seen amongst us that he can even grow younger, that his vital faculties grow strenuous, and seem as though they refresh themselves when his special pabulum is plenty. But he cannot flourish without this diet. He eat not as others. Even friend Jonathan, who lived with him for weeks, did never see him to eat. Never. He throws no shadow. He make in the mirror no reflect, as again Jonathan observe. He has the strength of many in his hand. Witness again Jonathan when he shut the door against the wolves, and when he help him from the diligence too. He can transform himself to wolf, as we gather from the ship arrival in Whitby, when he tear open the dog. He can be as bad, as Madam Nina saw him on the window at Whitby, and his friend John saw him fly from this so near house, as my friend Quincy saw him at the window of Miss Lucy. He can come in mist which he create. That noble ship's captain proved him of this. But from what we know, the distance he can make this mist is limited, and it can only be round himself. He come on moonlight rays as elemental dust, as again Jonathan saw those sisters in the castle of Dracula. He became so small. We ourselves saw Miss Lucy, if she was at peace, slip through a hairbreadth space of the tomb door. He can, when once he find his way, come out from anything or into anything, no matter how closely bound or even fused up with fire. Soldier, you call it. He rests in the dark. Great small power this in a world which might not shut for the light. But hear me through. He can do all these things, yet he is not free. Nay, he is even more prisoner than the slave of the galley, in his cell. He cannot go where he lists. He who is not of nature has yet to obey some of nature's laws. Why, we know not. He may not enter anywhere at first, unless there be someone of the household who bid him to come. Though afterwards he can come as he needs. His power ceases, as does that of all evil things, at the coming of the day. At certain times can he have limited freedom. If he be not at the place where he is bound, he can only change himself at noon, or at the exact sunrise or sunset. These things are told, and in this record of ours, thus, he can do as he will within his limit. When he have his earth home, his coffin home, his hell home, the place unhallowed as we saw when he went.
Oh, my baby. How old are you? I don't know. Alright, looks like we're having a kitty break. And that big handsome boy needs some lovin's. Yes, he does. What's that on your side? Dirt? Dirt. Hmm. What a good boy. I really don't have time for kitty kittises today. I want to get at least 2 bats done. Do you think I can go do the bats? Hi, welcome to the chat. We're just having a little kitty break because somebody needs some emotional support apparently. Yeah, what a good boy. I get your chair. There's some shit in it. Thumbs up for Kitty. And we'll get back to Dracula in a minute and sewing where you can't hear anything. Do 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 do. Hi, baby. No, hi, love. Yes, yes. Oh. Alright, let's go get your chair. Come on. Let's go get your chair. Here. Right within reach for pats. What a good boy. One day I will be rich, but today is not that day. Alrighty. Get back to work. Whoopsie. Hi, baby. What? Get down. Come on. Oh, no. He's just a big, handsome boy. Yep. Just lay down. Lay down for a bit. Let me see your face. There we go. Alright, lay down. I want to finish at least 1 bat tonight, okay?
To the grave of the suicide it would be. Still, at other time he can only change when the time come. It is said, too, that he can only pass running water at the slack or the flood of the tide. And there are things which so afflict him that he has no power, as the garlic that we know of. And as the thing sacred as this symbol, my crucifix, that was amongst us even now when we resolve. To them, he has nothing. But in their presence he take his place far off and silent with respect. There are others too, which I shall tell you of, lest in our seeking we may need them. The branch of wild rose on his coffin, keep him that he move not from it. A sacred bullet fired into the coffin, kill him, so that he be true dead. And as for the stake through him, we know already of its base. Or the cut-off head that giveth rest. We have seen it with our eyes. Thus, when we find the habitation of this man that was, we can confine him to his coffin and destroy him, if we obey what we know. But he is clever. I've asked my friend Arminius of Budapest University to make his record, and from all the means that are, he tell me of what he has been. He must, indeed, have been the Vavode Dracula who won his name against the Turk, over the great river on the very frontier of Turkland. If it be so, then was he no common gun. For in that time, and the centuries after, he was spoken of as the cleverest and the most cunning, as well as the bravest of the sons of the land beyond the forest. That mighty brain and that resolution went with him to his grave, and are even now arrayed against us. Dracula's were, says Arminius, a great and noble race. But now and again there were scions, who held novels to have had dealings with the evil one. They learned his secrets in the Scholomance, amongst the mountains of the Lake Hermanstead, where the devil claims the 10th scholar is his king. records are such words as Stragotka, witch, Ordog, and Popol, Satan and hell. And in one manuscript, this very Dracula is spoken of as vampire, which we all understand too well. There have been from the loins of this very one great men and good women, and their graves make sacred the earth where alone this foulness can dwell. For it is not the least of its terrors that this evil thing is rooted deep in all good. In soil barren of holy berries, it cannot rest. Whilst they were talking, Mr. Morris was looking steadily at the window. He now got up quietly and went out of the room. There was a little pause, and then the professor went on. And now we must settle what we do. We have here much data, and we must proceed to lay out our campaign. We know from the inquiry of Jonathan, from the castle to Whitby, came 50 boxes of earth, all of which were delivered at Carfax. We also know that at least some of these boxes have been removed. It seems to me that our first step should be to ascertain whether all the rest remain in the house beyond that wall where we look today, or whether any more have been removed. If the latter, we must trace... Here we were interrupted in a very startling way. Outside the house came the sound of a pistol shot. The glass of the window was shattered with a bullet which, ricocheting from the top of the embrasure, struck the far wall of the room. I'm afraid I'm a hearted coward, for I shrieked out. The men all jumped to their feet. Lord Godalming flew over to the window and threw up the sash. As he did so, we heard Mr. Morris's voice without. Sorry, I fear I've alarmed you. I shall come in and tell you about it. A minute later, he came in and said, It was an idiotic thing of me to do, and I ask your pardon, Mrs. Harker, most sincerely. I fear I must have frightened you terribly. But the fact is that whilst the professor was talking, there came a big bang and sat on the windowsill. I've got such a horror of the damn brutes from recent events that I cannot stand them, and I went out to have a shot, as I've been doing of late of evenings whenever I've seen one. You used to laugh at me for it then, Howard. Did you hit it? Asked Dr. Van Helsing. I don't know, I fancy not, but flew away into the wood. Without saying any more, he took his seat, and the professor began to resume his statement. We must trace each of these boxes. And when we are ready, we must either capture or kill this monster in his lair. Or we must, so to speak, sterilize the earth, so that no more he can seek safety in it. Thus, in the end, we may find him in his form of man between the hours of noon and sunset, and so engage with him when he is at his most weak. And now for you, Madame Nina. This night is the end, until all be well. You are too precious to us to have such risk. When we part tonight, you no more must question. We shall tell you all in good time, what our men and are able to bear, but you must be our star and our hope, and we shall act all the more free that you are not in a danger, such as we are. All the men, even Jonathan, seem relieved, but it did not seem to me good that they should bring danger and perhaps lessen their safety, strength being the best safety, through care of me. But their minds were made up, and though it was a bitter pill for me to swallow, I could say nothing, save to accept their chivalrous care of me. Mr. Morris resumed the discussion. As there is no time to lose, I vote we have a look at his house right now. Time is everything with him, and swift action on our part may save another victim. I own that my heart began to fail me when the time for action came so close, but I did not say anything. For I had a greater fear that I appeared as a drag or a hindrance to their work. They might even leave me out of their councils altogether. They have now gone off to Carfax, with means to get into the house. Man-like, they have told me to go to bed and sleep, because if a woman can sleep when those she loves are in danger. I shall lie down and pretend to sleep, lest Jonathan have added anxiety about me when he returns. Dr. Seward's diary. 1st of October, 4 a.m. The house. An urgent message. I told if I would see him at once, as he had somewhere to say to me. I told the messenger to say that I would attend to his wishes. busy just at the moment. The attendant, oh no, but what if you don't see him soon? He will have one of his violent fits. I knew the man would have not said this without some cause. So I said, all right, go now. And I asked the others to wait a few minutes for me, as I had to go see him. Take me with you, friend John, said the professor. His case in your diary interested me much. It had bearing, too, now and again in our case. I should much see him, and especially when his mind is disturbed. May I come also? Asked Lord. Me too, said Percy Morris.
As well.
I nodded, and we all went down the passage together. We found him in a state of considerable excitement, but far more rational in his speech and manner than I had ever seen him. There was an unusual understanding of himself, which was unlike anything I had ever met with in a lunatic. And he took it for granted that his reasons would prevail with others entirely sane. We all four went into the room, but none of the others at first said anything. His request was that I would at once release him from the asylum and send him home. This he backed up with arguments regarding his complete recovery, and deduced his own existing sanity. I appeal to your friends, he said. They will perhaps not mind sitting in judgment on my case. By the way, you have not introduced me. I was so astonished that the oddness of introducing a madman in an asylum did not strike me at the moment. And besides, there was a certain dignity in the man's manner, so much of the habit of equality, that I at once made the introduction. Lord Godalming, Professor Van Helsing, Mr. Quincy Morris of Texas, Mr. Renfield. He shook hands with each of them, saying in turn, Lord Godalming, I had the honour of seconding your father at the Wyndham. I grieve to know by your holding the title that he is no more. He was a man loved and honoured by all who knew him, and in his youth was, I have heard, the inventor of a burnt rum punch, which patronised on Derby night. Mr. Morris, you should be proud of your great state. Its reception into the Union was a precedent which may have far-reaching effects hereafter, when the Pole and the tropics may hold allegiance to the Stars and Stripes. The power of treaty may yet prove a vast engine of enlargement when the Monroe Doctrine takes its true place as a political fable. What shall any man say of his pleasure at meeting Van Helsing? Sir, I make no apology for dropping all forms of conventional basics. When an individual has revolutionized the discovery of the continuous evolution of brain matter, conventional forms are unfitting, since they would seem to limit him to one of a class. Gentlemen, who by nationality, by hereditary, or by the position of are fitted to hold your respective places in the moving world. But I am as sane as at least the majority of men who are in possession. And I'm sure that you, Dr. Seward, humanitarian and medico will deem it a moral duty to deal with me as one to be questioned in exceptional circumstances. He made this last appeal with a courtly air of conviction which was not without its own charm. I think we were all staggered. For my own part, I was under the conviction, despite my knowledge of the man's character and history,
I wonder.
that his reason had been restored. And I felt under a strong impulse to tell him that I was satisfied as to his sanity, and would see about the necessary formalities for his release in the morning. I thought it better to wait, however, before making so great a statement. For of old, I knew the sudden changes to which this particular patient was liable. So I contented myself with making a general statement that he appeared to be improving very rapidly, that I would have a longer chat with him in the morning, and would then see what I could do in the direction of meeting his wishes. This did not at all satisfy him, but he said quickly, But I fear, Dr. Seward, that you hardly apprehend my wish. I desire to go at once. Here, now, this very hour, this very moment, if I may. Time presses, and we are in quite agreement with the old Cyberman. It is of the essence of the contract. I'm sure it is only necessary to put before so admirable a practitioner as Dr. Seward so simple, yet so momentous a wish to ensure its fulfillment.
Oh, Jesus, I don't know what I'm looking for.
And seeing the negative in my face, turned to the others and scrutinized them closer. Not meeting any sufficient response, he went on. Is it possible that I've erred in my superstition? You have, I said frankly, but at the same time, as I felt, brutally. There was a considerable pause, and then he said slowly,
Come here.
Then I suppose I must only shift my ground of request. Let me ask for this concession. Boon, privilege, what you will. I am content to implore in such a case, not on personal grounds, but for the sake of others. I am not at liberty to give the whole of my reasons, but you may, I assure you, take it from me that they are good ones, sound and unselfish, and springing from the highest sense of duty. Could you look, sir, into my heart, you would approve to the full the sentiments that animate me. Nay, more, you would count me amongst the best and truest of your friends. Again, he looked at us keenly. I had a growing conviction that this sudden change of his entire intellectual method was but yet another form or phase of his madness.
No shit, Sherlock.
To go on a little longer, knowing from experience that he would, like all lunatics, give himself away in the end. Van Helsing was gazing at him with a look of the utmost intensity, his bushy eyebrows almost meeting with the fixed concentration of his look. He said to Renfield in a tone which did not surprise me at the time, but only when I thought of it afterwards. It was as of one addressing me equal. Can you not tell frankly your real reason for wishing to be treated? I will undertake that if you will satisfy even me, a stranger without prejudice and with the habit of keeping an open mind,
Hello.
Dr. Seward,
We're making bats.
at his own risk and on his own responsibility.
Because we're listening to Dracula.
Privilege you seek. He shook his head sadly and with a look of poignant regret on his face. The professor went on. Come, sir, bethink yourself. You claim the privilege of reason in the highest degree. But you seek to impress us with your complete reasonableness. You do this, whose sanity we have reason to doubt, since you are not yet released from medical treatment for this very defect. If you will not help us in our effort to choose the wisest course, how can we perform the duty which you yourself put upon us? Be wise and help us. And if we can, we shall aid you to achieve your wish.
There we
He
go.
still shook his head.
Fluffy body.
Dr. Van Helsing, I have nothing to say. Your argument is complete, and if I were free to speak, I should not hesitate a moment, but I am not my own master in a matter. I can only ask you to trust me. If I am refused, the responsibility does not rest with me. I thought it was now time to end the scene. It was becoming too comically grave. So I went towards the door, simply saying, "Come, my friends, we have work to do. Good night." As, however, I got near the door, a new change came over the patient. He moved towards me so quickly that for the moment I feared that he was about to make another homicidal attack. My fears, however, were groundless, for he held up his two hands imploringly and made his petition in a moving manner. As he saw that the very excess of his emotion was militating against him by restoring us more to our old relations, he became still more demonstrative. I glanced at Van Helsing and saw my conviction reflected in his eyes, so I became a little more fixed in my manner, if not more stern, and motioned to him that his efforts were unavailing. I had previously seen something of the same constantly growing excitement in him when he had to make some request of which at the time he had thought much. Such, for instance, as when he wanted a cat. And I was prepared to see the collapse into the same sullen acquiescence on this occasion. My expectation was not realized, for when he found that his appeal would not be successful, he got into quite a frantic condition. He threw himself on his knees and held up his hands, wringing them in plaintive supplication, and poured forth a torrent of entreaty, with the tears rolling down his cheeks and his whole face and form expressive of the deepest emotion. "Let me entreat you, Dr. Seward, oh, let me implore you to let me out of this house at once. Send me away how you will and where you will. Send keepers with me with whips and chains. Let them take me in a straight waistcoat, manacled and leg-ironed, even to a jail, but let me go out of this. You don't know what you do by keeping me here. I am speaking from the depths of my heart, of my very soul. You don't know whom you wrong or how. And I may not tell. Woe is me, I may not tell. By all you hold sacred, by all you hold dear, by your love that is lost, by your hope that lives, for the sake of the Almighty, take me out of this and save my soul from guilt. Can't you hear me, man? Can't you understand? Will you never learn? Don't you know that I am sane and earnest now, that I am no lunatic in a mad fit, but a sane man fighting for his soul? Hear me! Hear me! Let me go! Let me go! Let me go! I thought that the longer this went on, the wilder he would get, and so he'd bring on a fit. So I took him by the hand and raised him up. "Come," I said sternly. "No more of this. Quite enough already. Get to your bed and try to behave more discreetly." He suddenly stopped and looked at me intently for several moments. Then, without a word, rose, and moving over, sat down on the side of the bed. The collapse had come, as on former occasions, just as I had expected. When I was leaving the room, last of our party, he said to me, in a quiet, well-bred voice, "You will, I trust, Dr. Seward. Do me the justice to bear in mind later on that I did what I could to convince you tonight."
Angry penis just back again. Doo doo. My pants from my gut. Alright, let's see if we can get another chapter down tonight. I need to pick up my float. It's not perfect, but that's okay. This is the first one in a long time, so it just has to be done.
Chapter 19. Jonathan Harker's Journal. 1st of October, 5 a.m. I went with the party to the search with an easy mind, for I think I never saw Mina so absolutely strong and well. I'm so glad that she consented to hold back and let us men do the work. Somehow it was a dread to me that she was in this fearful business at all. But now that her work is done, and that it is due to her energy and brains and foresight that the whole story is put together in such a way that every point tells, she may well feel that her part is finished, and that she can henceforth leave the rest to us. We were, I think, all a little upset by the scene with Mr. Renfield. When we came away from his room, we were silent till we got back to the study. And then Mr. Morris said to Dr. Seward, "Say, Jack, if that man wasn't attempting a bluff, he's about the sanest lunatic I ever saw. I'm not sure, but I believe that he had some serious purpose. And if he had, it was pretty rough on him not to get a chance." Lord Goldenby and I were silent, but Dr. Van Helsing added, "Friend John, you know more of lunatics than I do, and I'm glad of it. For I fear that if it had been to me to decide, I would before, as last hysterical outburst, have given him free. But we live and learn, and in our present task we must take no chance, as my friend Quincy would say. All is best as they are." Dr. Seward seemed to answer them both in a dreamy kind of way. "I don't know, but I agree with you.
Okay, that's not perfect, but that's okay.
I would have taken my chance of trusting him. But he seems so mixed up with the Count in an indexy kind of way that I'm afraid of doing anything wrong by helping his friends. I can't forget how he prayed with almost equal fervor for a cat, and then tried to tear my throat out with his teeth. Besides, he called the Count Lord and Master, and he may want to get out to help him in some diabolical way. That horrid thing has the balls and the rats of his own kind to help him, so I suppose he isn't above trying to use a respectable lunatic. He certainly did seem earnest, though. I only hope we have done what is best. These things, in conjunction with the wild work we have had in hand, help to unnerve a man." The professor stepped over, and laying his hand on his shoulder, said in his grave, kindly way, "Friend John, have no fear. We are trying to do our duty in a very sad and terrible case. We can only do as we deem best. What else have we to hope for, except the pity of the good God?" Lord Goldenby had slipped away for a few minutes, but he now returned. He held up a little silver whistle as he remarked, "That old place may be full of rats, and if so, I've got an antidote on call." Having passed the wall, we took our way to the house, taking care to keep in the shadows of the trees on the lawn when the moonlight shone out. When we got to the porch, the professor opened his bag and took out a lot of things, which he laid on the step, sorting them into 4 little groups, evidently one for each. Then he spoke. "My friends, we are going into a terrible danger, and we need arms of many kinds. Our enemy is not merely spiritual. Remember that he has the strength of 20 men, and that, though our necks or our windpipes are of the common kind, and therefore breakable or crushable. His are not amenable to mere strength. A stronger man, or a body of men more strong in all than him, can at certain times hold him. But yet they cannot hurt him as we can be hurt by him. We must, therefore, guard ourselves from his touch. Keep this near your heart. As he spoke, he lifted a little silver crucifix and held it out to me. I being nearest to him. Part these flowers round your neck. Here, he handed to me a wreath of withered garlic blossoms. For other enemies more mundane, this revolver and this knife. And for aid in all, these so small electric lamps, which you can fasten to your breast. And for all, and above all at the last, this, which we must not desecrate needless. This was a portion of sacred wafer, which he put in an envelope and handed to me. Each of the others was similarly equipped. Now, he said, Friend John, where are the skeleton keys? If so that we can open the door, we need not break house by the window, as before at Miss Lucy's. Dr. Seward tried 1 or 2 skeleton keys, his mechanical dexterity as a surgeon standing him in good stead. Presently, he got one to suit. After a little play back and forward, the bolt yielded, and with a rusty clang, shot back. We pressed on the door. The rusty hinges creaked, and it slowly opened. It was startlingly like the image conveyed to me in Dr. Seward's diary of the opening of Miss Westerner's tomb. I fancied that the same idea seemed to strike the others. With one accord, they shrank back. The professor was the first to move forward and stepped into the open door. In manus tuas domine, he said, crossing himself as he passed over the threshold. We closed the door behind us, lest when we should have lit our lamps we should possibly attract attention from the road. The professor carefully tried the lock, lest we might not be able to open it from within should we be in a hurry making our exit. Then we all lit our lamps and proceeded on our search. The light from the tiny lamps fell in all sorts of odd forms as the rays crossed each other, or the opacity of our bodies threw great shadows. I could not for my life get away from the feeling that there was someone else amongst us. I suppose it was the recollection, so powerfully brought home to me by the grim surroundings, of that terrible experience in Transylvania. I think the feeling was common to us all, for I noticed that the others kept looking over their shoulders at every sound and every new shadow, just as I felt myself doing. The whole place was thick with dust. The floor was seemingly inches deep, except where there were recent footprints, in which, on holding down my lamp, I could see marks of hobnails where the dust was caked. The walls were fluffy and heavy with dust, and in the corners were masses of spiders' webs, whereon the dust had gathered till they looked like old tattered rags, as the weight had torn them partly down. On a table in the hall was a great bunch of keys, with a time yellowed label on each. They had been used several times, for on the table were several similar rents in the blanket of dust, similar to that exposed when the professor lifted them. He turned to me and said, You know this place, Jonathan. You have copied maps of it, and you know at least more than we do. Which is the way to the chapel? I had an idea of its direction, though on my former visit I had not been able to get admission to it, so I led the way, and after a few wrong turnings found myself opposite a low, arched oaken door, ribbed with iron bands. This is the spot, said the professor as he turned his lamp on a small map of the house, copied in the file of my original correspondence regarding the pages. With little trouble, we found the key on the bunch and opened the door. We were prepared for some unpleasantness. As we were opening the door, a faint, malodorous air seemed to exhale through the gaps. But none of us ever expected such an odour as we encountered. None of the others had met the Count at all at close quarters, and when I had seen him, he was either in the fasting stage of his existence in his rooms, or, when he was gorged with fresh blood, in a ruined building open to the air. But here, the place was small and close, and the long disuse had made the air stagnant and foul. There was an earthy smell, as of some dry miasma which came through the fouler air, but as for the odour itself, how shall I describe it? It was not alone that it was composed of all the ills of mortality and with the pungent, acrid smell of blood, but it seemed as though corruption had become itself corrupt. It sickens me to think of it. Every breath exhaled by that monster seemed to have clung to the place and intensified its loathsomeness. Under ordinary circumstances, such a stench would have brought our enterprise to an end. But this was no ordinary case, and the high and terrible purpose in which we were involved gave us a strength which rose above merely physical considerations. after the involuntary shrinking consequent on the first nauseous whiff. We one and all set about our work as though that loathsome place were a garden of roses. We made an accurate examination of the place. The professor saying as we began, "The first thing is to see how many of the boxes are left. We must then examine every hole and corner and cranny, and see if we cannot get some clue as to what has become of the rest." A glance was sufficient to show how many remained, for the great earth chests were bulky, and there was no mistaking them. There were only 29 left out of 50. Once I got a fright, for seeing Lord Godalming suddenly turn and look out of the vaulted door into the dark passage beyond. I looked too, and for an instant my heart stood still. Somewhere, looking out from the shadow, I seemed to see the highlights of the Count's evil face. The ridge of the nose, the red eyes, the red lips, the awful pallor. It was only for a moment, for, as Lord Godalming said, I thought I saw a face, but it was only the shadow, and resumed his inquiry. I turned my lamp in the direction, and stepped into the passage. There was no sign of anyone, and as there were no corners, no doors, no aperture of any kind, but only the solid walls of the passage. There could be no hiding place, even for him. I took it that fear had helped imagination, and said nothing. A few minutes later, I saw Morris step suddenly back from a corner which he was examining. We all followed his movements with our eyes, for undoubtedly some nervousness was growing on us, and we saw a whole mass of phosphorescence, which twinkled like stars. We all instinctively drew back. The whole place was becoming alive with rats. For a moment or two, we stood appalled, all save Lord Godalming, who was seemingly prepared for such an emergency. Rushing over to the great iron-bound oaken door, which Dr. Seward had described from the outside, and which I had seen myself, he turned the key in the lock, drew the huge bolts, and swung the door open. Then, taking his little silver whistle from his pocket, he blew a low, shrill call. It was answered from behind Dr. Seward's house by the yelping of dogs, and after about a minute, 3 terriers came dashing round the corner of the house. Unconsciously, we had all moved towards the door, and as we moved, I noticed the dust had been much disturbed. The boxes which had been taken out had been brought this way. But even in the minute that had elapsed, the number of the rats had vastly increased. They seemed to swarm over the place all at once, for the lamplight, shining on their moving dark bodies and glittering baleful eyes, made the place look like a bank of earth set with fireflies. The dogs dashed on, but at the threshold suddenly stopped and snarled, and then, simultaneously lifting their noses, began to howl in most lugubrious fashion. The rats were multiplying in thousands, and we moved out. Lord Godalming lifted one of the dogs, and carrying him in, placed him on the floor.
Dude, you sacrificed a dog?
Ground, he seemed to recover his courage, and rushed at his natural enemies. They fled before him so fast that before he had shaken the life out of the score, the other dogs, who had by now been lifted in the same manner, had but small prey, and the whole mass had vanished. With their going, it seemed as if some evil presence had departed, for the dogs frisked about and barked merrily as they made sudden darts at their prostrate foes, and turned them over and over and tossed them in the air with vicious shakes. They all seemed to find our spirits rise. Whether it was the purifying of the deadly atmosphere by the opening of the chapel door, or the relief which we experienced by finding ourselves in the open, I know not. But most certainly, the shadow of dread seemed to slip from us like a robe, and the occasion of our coming lost something of its grim significance, though we did not slacken a whit in our resolution. We closed the outer door and barred and locked it, and bringing the dogs with us, began our search of the house. We found nothing throughout except dust in extraordinary proportions, and all untouched, save for my own footsteps when I had made my first visit. Never once did the dogs exhibit any symptom of uneasiness, and even when we returned to the chapel, they frisked about as though they had been rabbit hunting in a summer wood.
Ah!
The morning was quickening in the east when we emerged from the front. Dr. Van Helsing had taken the key of the hall door from the bunch and locked the door in orthodox fashion, putting the key into his pocket when he had done.
I don't know, I like the way they say pocket.
So far, he said, our night has been eminently successful. No harm has come to us such as I feared might be. And yet, we have ascertained how many boxes are missing. More than all, do I rejoice that this, our first, and perhaps our most difficult and dangerous, step has been accomplished, without the bringing thereinto our most sweet Madam Mina, or troubling her waking or sleeping thoughts with sights and sounds and smells of horror, which she might never forget. One lesson, too, we have learned. If it be allowable to argue a particular that the brute beasts which are to the Count's command are yet themselves not amenable to his spiritual power. For look, these rats that would come to his call, just as from his castle top he summoned the wolves to your going, and to that poor mother's cry, though they come to him, they run pell-mell from the so little dogs of my friend Arthur. We have other matters before us, other dangers, other fears, and that monster, he has not used his power over the brute world for the only or the last time tonight. So be it that he has gone elsewhere. Good. It has given us opportunity to cry check in some ways in this chess game, which we play for the stake of human souls. And now let us go home. The dawn is close at hand, and we have reason to be content with our first night's work. It may be ordained that we have many nights and days to follow, if full of peril, but we must go on, and from no danger shall we shrink. The house was silent when we got back, save for some poor creature who was screaming away in one of the distant wards, and a low, moaning sound from Renfield's room. The poor wretch was doubtless torturing himself, after the manner of the insane, with needless thoughts of pain. I came tiptoe into our own room and found Mina asleep, breathing so softly that I had to put my ear down to hear it. She looks paler than usual.
Oh no.
I hope the meeting tonight has not upset her. I'm truly thankful that she is to be left out of our future work, and even of our deliberations. It is too great a strain for a woman to bear. I did not think so at first, but I know better now. Therefore, I am glad that it is settled. There may be things which would frighten her to hear, and yet to conceal them from her might be worse than to tell her if once she suspected that there was any concealment. Henceforth, our work is to be a sealed book to her, until at least such time as we can tell her that all is finished, and the earth free from a monster of the netherworld. I dare say it will be difficult to begin to keep silence after such confidence as ours. But I must be resolute, and tomorrow I shall keep dark over tonight's doings, and shall refuse to speak of anything that has happened. I rest on the sofa, so as not to disturb her. First of October. Later. I suppose it was natural that we should have all overslept ourselves, for the day was a busy one and the night had no rest at all. Even Mina must have felt its exhaustion. Though I slept till the sun was high, I was awake before her and had to call 2 or 3 times before she awoke. Indeed, she was so sound asleep that for a few seconds she did not recognize me, but looked at me with a sort of blank terror, as one looks who has been waked out of a bad dream. She complained a little of being tired, and I let her rest till later in the day. We now know of 21 boxes having been removed, and if it be that several were taken in any of these removals, we may be able to trace them all.
Oh, charts.
Such will, of course, immensely simplify our labour, and the sooner the matter is attended to, the better.
Fabric.
I shall look up Thomas Snelling today.
We can do one. That's why I bought it after all. It would be a waste not
Dr.
to try.
Seward's diary. 1st of October. It was towards noon when I was awakened by the professor walking into my room. He was more jolly and cheerful than usual, and it is quite evident that last night's work has helped to take some of the brooding weight off his mind. After going over the adventure of the night, he suddenly said, "Your patient interests me much. May it be that with you I visit him this morning, or if that you are too occupied, I can go alone, if it may be.
I bet he's
You expect me
dead.
to find a lunatic who talk philosophy and reason so sound. I had some work to do which pressed, so I told him that if he would go alone, I would be glad, because then I should not have to keep him waiting. So I called an attendant and gave him the necessary instructions. Before the professor left the room, I cautioned him against getting any false impression from my patient. "But," he answered, "I want him to talk of himself and of his delusion as to consuming live things. He said to Madame Mina, as I see in your diary of yesterday, Did not once have such a belief. Why do you smile, friend John? Excuse me, I said, but the answer is here. I laid my hand on the typewritten letter. The sane and learned lunatic made that very statement of how he used to consume life. His mouth was actually nauseous with the flies and spiders which he had eaten just before Mrs. Harker had entered the room. Van Helsing smiled in turn. Right, he said. Your memory is true, friend John. I should have remembered. And yet it is this very obliquity of thought and memory which makes mental disease such a fascinating study. Perhaps I may gain more knowledge out of the folly of this madman than I shall from the teaching of the most wise. Who knows? I went on with my work, and before long was through that in hand. It seemed that the time had been very short indeed.
That hurts
But there
still.
was Van Helsing back in the study. Do I interrupt? He asked politely as he stood at the door. Not at all, I answered. Come in. My work is finished and I'm free. I can go with you now if you like. It is needless. I have seen him. Well, I fear that he does not appraise me as much. Our interview was short. When I entered his room, he was sitting on a stool in the centre, with his elbows on his knees and his face with a picture of sullen discontent. I spoke to him as cheerfully as I could, and with such a measure of respect as I could assume. He made no reply whatever. Don't you know me? I asked. His answer was not reassuring. I know you well enough. You are the old fool Van Helsing. I wish you would take yourself and your idiotic brain theories somewhere else. Damn more thick-headed Dutchman. Not a word more would he say, but sat in his implacable sullenness, as indifferent to me as though I had not been in the room at all. Thus departed from this time my chance of much learning from this so clever lunatic. So I shall go, if I may, and cheer myself with a few happy words with that sweet soul, Madame Mie. Friend John, it does rejoice me unspeakable that she is no more to be pained, no more to be worried. Terrible things.
Foreshadowing!
So much miss her held, it is better so. I agree with you with all my heart, I answered earnestly. I did not want him to weaken in this matter. Mrs. Harker is better out. Things are quite bad enough to us, all men of the world and who have been in many tight places in our time. There's no place for a woman.
Shut up.
It would in time infallibly have wrecked her.
We gotta be everything.
So, Van Helsing has gone to confer with Mrs. Harker and Harker. Quincy and Art are all out following up the clues as the earth boxes. I shall finish my round of work, and we shall meet tonight.
Tonight. Hiccups. We can put that back.
Harker's journal. 1st of October. It is strange to me to be kept in the dark as I am today. After Jonathan's full confidence for so many years, to see him manifestly avoid certain matters, and those the most vital of all. This morning I slept late after the fatigues of yesterday, and though Jonathan was late too, he was there earlier. He spoke to me before he went out, never more sweetly or tenderly, but he never mentioned a word of what had happened in the visit to the Count's house, and yet he must have known how terribly anxious I was. Oh, dear fellow. I suppose it must have distressed him even more than it did me. They all agreed that it was best that I should not be drawn further into this awful work, and I acquiesced. But to think that he keeps anything from me. And now I am crying like a silly fool, but I know it comes from my husband's great love and from the good wishes of those other strong men. That has done me good. Well, someday Jonathan will tell me all. Unless it should be that he should think for a moment that I kept anything from him, I still keep my journal as usual. Then, if he is feared of my trust, I shall show it to him. With every thought of my heart put down for his dear eyes to read. I feel strangely sad and low-spirited today. I suppose it is the reaction from the terrible excitement. Last night I went to bed when the men had gone simply because they told me to. I didn't feel sleepy, and I did feel full of devouring anxiety. I kept thinking over everything that has been ever since Jonathan came to see me in London, and it all seems like a horrible tragedy, with fate pressing on relentlessly to some destined end. Everything that one does seems, no matter how right it may be, to bring on the very thing which is most to be deplored. If I hadn't gone to Whitby, perhaps poor dear Lucy would be with us now. She hadn't taken to visiting the churchyard till I came, and if she hadn't come there in the daytime with me, she wouldn't have walked there in her sleep. And if she hadn't come there at night in her sleep, that monster couldn't have destroyed her as he did. Oh, why did I ever go to Whitby? There now, crying again. I wonder what has come over me today. I must hide it from Jonathan, who knew that I'd been crying twice in one morning. I, who never cried on my own account, and who he has never caused to shed a tear, the dear fellow would fret his heart out. I shall put a bold face on. And if I do feel weepy, he shall never see it. I suppose it is one of the lessons that we poor women have to learn.
Ugh.
I can't quite remember how I fell asleep last night. I remember hearing the sudden barking of the dogs, and a lot of curious sounds, like a praying over a tumultuous scale in Mr. Renfield's room, which is somewhere under this. And then, there was silence over everything. Silence so profound that it scared me. And I got up and looked out of the window. All was dark and silent, the black shadows thrown by the moonlight seemed full of a silent mystery of their own. Not a thing seemed to be stirring, but all to be grim and fixed as death or fate. So there's a thin streak of white mist that fled with almost imperceptible slowness across the grass towards the house. It seemed to have a sentience, a vitality of its own. I think that the digression of my thoughts must have done me good. When I got back to bed, I found a lethargy creeping over me. I lay a while, and could not quite sleep. So I got out and looked out of the window again. The mist was spreading. I was now close up to the house, so I could see it lying thick against the wall, as though it was stealing up to the windows. The poor man was more loud than ever, and though I could not distinguish a word he said, I could in some way recognise in his tones some passionate entreaty on his part. Then there was the sound of a struggle, and I knew that the attendants were dealing with it. I was so frightened that I crept into bed and pulled the clothes over my head, putting my fingers in my ears. I was not then a bit sleepy. At least, so I thought. But I must have fallen asleep. I think that it took me an effort and a little time to realise where I was, and it's almost typical of the way that waking thoughts become merged in, or continued in, dreams. I thought that I was asleep and waiting for Jonathan. I was very anxious about him. My hands and my brain were waiting, so that nothing could proceed at the usual pace. So I sighed uneasily and thought. And then, cold, I got back the clothes to my face and found, to my surprise, that all was dim around me. The light which I had left lit for Jonathan went down. Like a spark through the fog. Should ever be my shut the window before I had come. I was not to make certain on the point. The chief seemed to clear out. I lay still and endured. That was all. I closed my eyes. What tricks our dreams play on us, and how convenient that we can imagine. The mist was thicker and thicker. I could see now how it came in, for I could see it like smoke, or with the wind. Not through the window, but through the joinings of the door. It got thicker and thicker until it seemed as if it became concentrated into a sort of pillar. Shining like a red eye. Things began to well through my brain just as spiritual words. A pillar of cloud by day, and a fire by night. Was it indeed some spiritual guidance that was the pillar was composed of both the day and the night guiding. As I looked, the fire divided. Instead of shining eyes, a momentary mental wandering hanging on the cliff, the guiding sunlight struck the windows of St. Mary's Church. Suddenly, the horror burst upon me that it was thus that Jonathan had seen those awful women growing into reality through the whirling mist in the moonlight. In my dream, I must have fainted, for all became black darkness. The last conscious effort which imagination made was to show me a livid white face bending over me out of the mist. I must be careful of such dreams. They would unseat one's reason if there were too much of them. I would get Dr. Van Helsing or Dr. Seward to prescribe something for me which would make me sleep, only that I fear to alarm them. Such a dream at the present time would become woven into their fears for me.
Let's talk all about Dracula,
I shall strive hard.
and then ignore all the fucking warning signs.
Not. I shall tomorrow night get them to give me a dose of chlorine. That cannot hurt me for once, and it will give me a good night's sleep. Last night tired me more than if I had not slept at all. Second of October, 10 p.m. Last night I slept, but did not dream. I must have
Stop
slept
licking your
and
fucking
waited
lips.
until I come to bed.
Oh,
But the sleep has not refreshed me. Today I feel terribly weak and spiritless. I spent all yesterday trying to read or lying down dozing. In the afternoon, Mr. Renfrew asked if he might see me. Poor man. He was very gentle. And when I came away, he kissed my hand and bade God bless me. In some way, it affected me much. I'm crying when I think of him. This is a new weakness of which I must be careful. Jonathan would be miserable if he knew I'd be crying. Yet the others were out until dinner time, and they all came in tired. I did what I could to brighten them up, and I suppose that the effort did me good. I forgot how tired I was. After dinner, they sent me to bed, and all went off to smoke together, as they said. But I knew that they wanted to tell each other of what had occurred to each during the day. I could see from Jonathan's manner that he had something important to communicate. I was not so sleepy as I should have been. And before they went, I asked Dr. Seward to give me a little opiate of some kind, as I had not slept well the night before. He very kindly made me up a sleeping draught, which he gave me.
just fucking read it.
Did me no harm, as it was very light.
Ugh, it's making me uncomfortable.
Still keeps aloof. I hope I have not done wrong, for sleep begins to flirt with me. A new fear comes. I have been foolish in depriving myself of the power of waking. I might want it. Here comes.
Stop licking your fucking lips! Holy shit!
Good night.
Like, I breathe loud and that's annoying. And I don't want to fucking end this. We got one more video to go and you were driving me nuts with this Nina thing. Twice. I've been crying. Damn it. Just stop. Just read the book.
Walk is an SUV made to move your family.
Ugh, fucking hate commercials you can't skip.
When in doubt, just make it till you bake it.
Fucking sentences just. It's like listening to somebody eat.
Dracula.
Alright, sorry about that. I'm back. I'm better now.
Chapter 20. Jonathan Harker's Journal. 1st of October. I found Thomas Snelling in his house at Bethnal Green, but unhappily he was not in a condition to remember. Very prospective it proved too much, and he had begun too early on his expected debauch. I learned, however, that his wife, who seemed to be was not consistent to Smollett, who responsible person. So off I drove to Walworth and found Inspector Swallow saucer. He is a decent, intelligent man, distinctly a good, reliable type of workman. You remember the Brown incident with the boxes? And from a wonderful dog's-eared notebook, which he produced from some mysterious receptacle about the seat of his trousers, and which had hieroglyphical entries in thick, half-obliterated pencil. He gave me the destinations of the boxes. There were, he said, 6 in the carload, which he took from Carfax and left at 197 Chickson Street, Mile End, Newtown, and another 6 which he deposited at Jamaica Lane, Bermondsey. If then the Count meant to scatter these ghastly refuges over his London, these places were chosen as the first of delivery, so that later he might distribute more fully. The systematic manner in which this was done made me think that he did not mean to confine himself to 2 sides of London. He was now fixed on the far east of the northern shore, on the east of the southern shore, and on the south. The north and west were surely never meant to be left out of his diabolical scheme, let alone the city itself, and very hard to fashionable London in the southwest. I went to Scotland and asked him if he could tell if any of the boxes had been taken from Carfax. He replied, "Street areas. Half a second. Tell you all I know. Loxham said 4 nights ago in the Air and Hounds in Pincher's Alley. As how he and his maid had done a very dusty job in Old House, superfluously. There ain't any such places, isn't there? I asked him to tell me where to find him. I told him that he wanted to be addressed. So he got down to his saying that he was going to begin the search then and there. At the door, he stopped and said, "Look here, Governor. There ain't no sense in me keeping you in. I may find some soon, or I mayn't. But anyhow, he ain't like to be in a way to tell you much tonight. Sam's a round one when he starts on the blues. If you can give me an envelope with a stamp on it, and put your address on it, I'll find out where Sam is to be found and post it to you tonight. But you'd be better up part of him soon in the morning, and maybe he won't catch him. But Sam gets off Main early. Never mind the booze the night before." This was all practical. So one of the children went off with a penny to buy an envelope and a sheet of paper, and to keep the change. When she came back, I addressed the envelope and stamped it, and when Smollett had again faithfully promised to post the address when found, I took my way to home. We're on the track, anyhow. I am tired tonight and want sleep. Mina is fast asleep and looks a little too pale. Her eyes look as though she'd been crying. Poor dear. I've no doubt it frets her to be kept in the dark, and it may make her doubly anxious about me and the others. But it is best as it is. It is better to be disappointed and worried in such a way now than to have her nerves broken.
This is where people start doing the thing where they don't fucking talk.
Kept out of this dreadful business. I must be firm, for on me this particular burden of silence must rest. I shall not ever enter on the subject with her under any circumstances. Indeed, it may not be a hard task after all, for she herself has become reticent on the subject, and has not spoken of the Count or his doings ever since we told her of our decision. Second of October. Evening. A long and trying and exciting day. By the first post, I got my directed envelope with a dirty scrap of paper enclosed, on which was written with a carpenter's pencil in a sprawling hand, Sam Bloxham, Corcoran's, 4, Poter's Court, Bartle Street, Walworth. Ask for the Deepite. I got the letter in bed and rose without waking Mina. She looked heavy and sleepy and pale and far from well. I determined not to wake her, but that when I should return from this new search, I would arrange for her going back to Exeter. I think she would be happier in our own home with her daily tasks to interest her than being here amongst us and in ignorance. I only saw Dr. Seward for a moment and told him where I was off to, promising to come back and tell the rest so soon as I should have found out anything. I drove to Walworth and found, with some difficulty, Potter's Court. Mr. Smollett's spelling misled me, and I asked for Poter's Court instead of Potter's Court. However, when I found the court, I had no difficulty.
Oh wait, where's the feet?
Corcoran's lodging house.
Yes.
When I asked the man who came to the door for the Deepite, he shook his head and said, "We don't know him. There ain't no such a person here. Never heard of him in all my blooming days. Don't believe there ain't nobody of that kind living here or anywheres." I took out Smollett's letter, and as I read it, it seemed to me that the lesson of the spelling of the name of the court might guide me. What are you? I asked. I'm the deputy, he answered. I saw at once that I was on the right track. Phonetic spelling had again misled me. A half-crown tip with a deputy's knowledge at my disposal. And I learned that Mr. Bloxham, who had slapped off the remains of his beer on the previous night at Cauldron's, had left for his work at Poplar at 5 o'clock that morning. He could not tell me where the place or work was situated. He had a vague idea that it was some kind of a new-fangled warehouse. And with this slender clue, I had to start for Poplar. It was 12 o'clock before I got any satisfactory hint of such a building, and this I got at a coffee shop, where some workmen were having their dinner. One of these suggested that there was being erected across Angel Street a new cold storage building, and as this suited the condition of a new-fangled warehouse, I at once drove them. An interview with a surly gatekeeper and a surlier foreman, both of whom were appeased with the coin of the realm, put me on the track of Bloxham. He was sent for on my suggesting that I was willing to pay his day's wages as foreman, and the privilege of asking him a few questions on a private matter. He was a smart enough fellow, though rough of speech and bearing. When I had promised to pay for his information and given him an earnest, he told me that he had made 2 journeys between Carfax and a house in Piccadilly, and had taken from his house to the latter 9 great boxes, main heavy ones. What his purpose? I asked him if he could tell me about the house in Piccadilly, to which he replied, "Well, Governor, I forget's the number. Well, it was only a few doors from the Boy Church or something of the kind. Not long built. It was a dusty old house, too. That's the house we took the boxes from. How did you get the boxes? It's like me away in now so perfectly. He helped me to lift the boxes and put them in the dray. That's me. I was a slack. And him an old fella. The white moustache. Wasn't that thing here. I think he couldn't throw a shot. How this phrase thrilled through me. Why, he took up his end of the boxes like it was about to tea. And me a puffing end up blowing before I could end up lying anyhow. And I'm no chicken neither. He was there too. Master started off and got there before me. For a right long like a bell, he came and opened the door himself and helped me to carry the boxes into the hall. The whole night, I asked. Yes, there was 5 in the first load and 4 in the second. It was main dry work. I don't so well remember how I got home. I interrupted him. Were the boxes left in the hall? Yes, it was a big hall. And there was nothing else in it. Key? Never used no key, no, nothing. The old gent, he opened the door himself and shut it again when I drove off. I don't remember the last time. But that was the beer. The house? No, sir. But you needn't have no difficulty about that. It's higher. There's a front of the bell on it. And I steps up to the door. I know them steps, having had to carry the boxes up with 3 loafers what come round to earn a copper. The old gent gave them shillings, and they seen they got so much, they wanted more. But he took one of them by the shoulder and was like to throw him down the steps. So a lot of them went away, cussing. I thought that with this description I could find the house, so I put my friend consideration and started experience. The Count could, it was evident, handle the earth boxes himself. If so, time was precious. For, now that he had achieved a certain amount of distribution, he could, by choosing his own time, complete the task unobserved. At Piccadilly Circus, I discharged my cab and walked westward. Beyond the Junior Constitutional, I came across the house described, and was satisfied that this was the next of the lairs arranged by Dracula. The house looked as though it had been long untenanted. The windows were encrusted with dust, and the shutters were up. All the framework was black with time, and for the iron, the paint had mostly scaled away. It was evident that up to lately there had been a large notice board in front of the balcony. It had, however, been roughly torn away, the uprights which had supported it still remaining. Behind the rails of the balcony, I saw there were some loose boards, whose raw edges looked wide. I would have given a good deal to have been able to see the notice board intact, as it would, perhaps, have given some clue to the ownership of the house. I remembered my experience of the investigation and purchase of Carpet, and I could feel that if I could find the former owner, there might be some means discovered of gaining access to the house. There was at present nothing to be learned from it, myself, what could be done. Nothing could be gathered from solicited. The news were active, the Piccadilly houses being mostly in occupation. I asked one or two of the grooms and helpers whom I saw around if they could tell me anything about the empty house. One of them said that he heard it had lately been taken, but he couldn't say from whom. He told me, however, that up to very lately there had been a notice board for sale, and that perhaps Mitchell, Sons and Candy, the house agents, could tell me something, as he thought he remembered seeing the name of it on the board. I did not wish to seem too eager, or to let my informant know or guess too much. So, I began in a manner. It was over, I guess, in the autumn nights, having learned the address of Mitchell, Sons and Candy from a directory at the Berkeley, I was soon at their office in Sackville Street.
I remember how to do this the other way.
It was particularly suave in manner, but uncommunicative in equal proportion. Having once told me that the Piccadilly house, which throughout our interview he called a mansion, was sold, he considered my business as concluded. When asked who had purchased it, he opened his eyes a thought wider, and paused a few seconds before replying, "It is sold, sir." "Pardon me," I said with equal politeness, "but I have a special reason for wishing to know who purchased it." Again he paused longer, and raised his eyebrows slightly more. "It is sold, sir," was again his laconic reply. "Sure," I said, "you do not mind letting me know, sir." He answered, "The affairs of their clients are absolutely safe in the hands of Mitchell, Sons and Candy." This was manifestly a prig of the first water, and there was no use arguing with him. I thought I had best meet him on his own ground, so I said, "Your clients, sir, are happy in having so resolute a guardian of their confidence. I am myself a professional man." Here I handed him my card. "In this instance, I am not prompted by curiosity. I act on the part of Lord Goldenring, who wishes to know something of the property which was, he understood, lately for sale." These words put a different complexion on affairs. He said, "I would like to oblige you if I could, Mr. Harker, and especially would I like to oblige his lordship. We once carried out a small matter of renting some chambers for him when he was the Honourable Arthur Homewood. If you will let me have his lordship's address, I will consult the house on the subject, and well, in any case, communicate with his lordship by tonight's post. It will be a pleasure if we can so far deviate from our rules as to give the required information to his lordship." I wanted to secure a friend and not to make an enemy, so I thanked him, gave the address at Dr. Seward's, and came away. It was now dark, and I was tired. I got a cup of tea at the Aerated Bread Company, and came down to Berkeley for the next train. I found all the others at home. Mina was looking tired and pale, but she made a gallant effort to be bright and cheerful. It wrung my heart to think that I had to keep anything from her, and so caused her inquietude. Thank God this will be the last night of her looking on at our conferences and feeling the sting of our not showing our confidence. It took all my courage to hold to the wise resolution of keeping her out of our grim task. She seems somehow more reconciled, or else the very subject seems to have become repugnant to her.
7 chapters
When
left.
any accidental allusion is made, she actually shudders. I'm glad we made our resolution in time. It was such a feeling as this. Our growing knowledge would be torture to her. I could not tell the others of the day's discovery until we were alone. So after dinner, followed by a little music to save appearances, even amongst ourselves, I took Mina to her room and left her to go to bed. The dear girl was more affectionate with me than ever, and clung to me as though she would detain me. But there was much to be talked of, and I came away. Thank God the season of telling things had made no difference between us. When I came down again, I found the others all gathered round the fire in the study. In the train, I had written my diary so far, and simply read it off to them as the best means of letting them get abreast of my own information. When I had finished, Van Helsing said, "This has been a great day's work, friend Jonathan. Doubtless we are on the track of the missing boxes. If we find them all in that house, then our work is near the end. But if there be some missing, we must search until we find them. Then shall we make our final coup and hunt the wretch to his real death." We all sat silent a while, and all at once Mr. Morris spoke. "Say, how are we going to get into that house?" "We got into the other," answered Lord Goldenring quickly. "But this is different. We broke house at Carfax, but we had an eye in the walled park to protect us." It will be a mighty different thing to commit burglary in Piccadilly, either by day or night. I confess I don't see how we're going to get in unless that agency duck can find us a key of some sort. Perhaps we shall know when you get his later in the morning. Lord Goldenwing's brows contracted, and he stood up and walked about the room. By and by, he stopped and said, turning from one to another of us, Quincy's head is level. This burglary business is getting serious. We got off once all right, but we have now a rare job on hand. Unless we can find the Count's key basket. As nothing could well be done before morning, and as it would be at least advisable to wait till Lord Goldenwing should hear from Mitchell's, we decided not to take any active step before breakfast time. For a good while we sat and smoked, discussing the matter in its various lights and bearings. I took the opportunity of bringing this diary right up to the moment. I'm very sleepy, and shall go to bed. Just a line. Mina sleeps soundly, and her breathing is regular. Her forehead is puckered up into little wrinkles, as though she thinks even in her sleep. She is still too pale, but does not look so haggard as she did this morning. Tomorrow will, I hope, mend all this. She will be herself at home in Exeter.
I don't need to hear your lips and tongue talking.
Sleepy.
I don't know why it's bothering me so much now. Ooh,
Dr.
everything,
Seward's diary,
everything got dizzy.
1st of October. I am puzzled about Renfield. His moods change so rapidly that I find it difficult to keep in touch with them. And as I always mean something more than his own well-being, they form a more than interesting study. This morning, when I went to see him after his repulse of Van Helsing, his manner was that of a man commanding destiny. He was, in fact, commanding destiny.
Hi, sweetie.
Subjectively. He did not really care for any of the things of mere earth. He was in the
Oh, my
clouds,
love.
and looked down on all the weaknesses and wants of us poor mortals. I thought I would improve the occasion and learn something. So, I asked him, what about the flies these times? He smiled at me in quite a superior sort of way. Such a smile as would have become the face of Malvolio. As he answered me, the fly, my dear sir, has one striking feature. Its wings are typical of the aerial powers of the psychic faculties. The ancients did well when they typified the soul as a butterfly. I thought I would push his analogy to its utmost, logically. So I said quickly,
Oh, big boy.
oh, it is a soul you are after now, is it? His madness foiled his reason, and a puzzled look spread over his face, as, shaking his head with a decision which I had but seldom seen in him, he said, oh no, I want no soul. Life is all I want. Here, he brightened up. Pretty idiotic at present. Life is all right. I have one. You must get a new patient, doctor, if you want to. This puzzled me a little, so I drew it. Then you command life. You are a god, I suppose. He smiled with an ineffably benign superiority. Oh, no. Far be it from me to arrogate to myself the attributes of the deity. I'm not even concerned with the special spiritual doings. If I may state my intellectual position, I am, so far as concerns things purely rational, somewhat in the position which Enoch occupied spiritually. This was a pose at me. I could not at the moment recall Enoch's suppositiveness, so I had to ask a simple question, though I felt that by doing so I was lowering myself in the eyes of the lunatic. And why Enoch? Because he walked with God. I could not see the analogy, but did not like to admit it, so I harked back to what he had denied. So you don't care about life and you don't want souls? Why not? I put my question quickly and somewhat stern, on purpose to disconcert him. The effort succeeded. For an instant, he unconsciously relapsed into his old servile manner, bent low before me, and actually fawned upon me as he replied, I don't want any souls, indeed, I don't. I couldn't use them if I had them. They would be no manner of use to me. I couldn't eat them, or... He suddenly stopped, and the old cunning look spread over his face, like a wind sweep on the surface of the water. And, Doctor, as to life, what is it after all? When you've got all you require, and you know that you will never want, that is all. I have friends. Good friends. Like you, Dr. Seward. This was said with a leer of inexpressible cunning. I know that I shall never lack the means of life. I think that through the cloudiness of his insanity, he saw some antagonism in me. He at once fell back on the last refuge of such as he. A dogged silence. After a short time, I saw that for the present it was useless to speak to him. He was sulky, and so I came away. Later in the day, he sent for me. Ordinarily, I would not have come without special reason, but just at present, I'm so interested in him that I would gladly make an effort. Besides, I'm glad to have anything to help to pass the time. Parker is out, following up clues. Someone golden ring and Quincy. Van Helsing says this. The record prepared by the Harkers. He seems to think that by accurate knowledge of all details, he will light upon something. He does not wish to be disturbed in the work. I had taken him with me to see the patients, and I thought that after his last repulse, he might not care to go again. There was also another reason. Enfield might not speak so freely before a third person as when he and I were alone. I found him sitting out in the middle of the floor in his stall, a pose which is generally indicative of some mental energy on his part. When I came in, he said at once, as though the question had been waiting on his lips, "What about souls?" It was evident then that my surmise had been correct. Unconscious celebration was doing its work, even with the lunatic. I determined to have the matter out. "What about them yourself?" I asked. He did not reply for a moment, but looked on and up and down, as though he expected to find some inspiration for an answer. "I don't want any souls," he said in a feeble, apologetic way. The matter seemed preying on his mind, and so I determined to use it. To be cruel only to be kind. So I said, "You like life, and you want life?" "Oh, yes, but that is all right. You needn't worry about that." "But," I asked, "how are we to get the life without getting the soul also?" This seemed to puzzle him, so I followed it up. "A nice time you'll have sometime when you're flying out there, with the souls of thousands of flies and spiders and birds and cats, buzzing and twittering and meowing all around you. You've got their lives, you know, but you must put up with their souls." Something seemed to affect his imagination, for he put his fingers to his ears and shut his eyes, screwing them up tightly, just as a small boy does when his face is being soaped. There was something pathetic in it that touched me. It also gave me a lesson. Before me was a child. A child. Though the features were worn and the skin on the jaws was white. It was evident that he was undergoing some process of mental disturbance. And, knowing how his past moods had interpreted things seemingly foreign to himself, I thought I would enter into his mind as well as I could. Go with him. The first stage was confidence. So I asked him, speaking pretty loud so that he would hear me through his closed ears, "Would you like some sugar to get your flies round again?" He seemed to wake up all at once, and shook his head. I laughed. "Not much. Flies are poor things after all." After a pause, he added, "But I don't want their souls buzzing round me all the same." "Or spiders," I went on. "Blow spiders? What's the use of spiders? There isn't anything in them to eat, or..." He stopped suddenly, as though reminded of the forbidden topic. So, I thought to myself. This is the second time he has suddenly stopped at the word drink. What does it mean? Renfield seemed himself aware of having made a lapse, but he hurried on, as though to distract my attention from it. "I don't take any stock at all in such matters. Rats and mice and such small deer, as Shakespeare has it. Chicken feed of the larder, they might be called. I'm past all that sort of nonsense. You might as well ask a man to eat molecules with a pair of chopsticks as to try to interest me about the lesser carnivora, when I know of what is before me." "I see," I said. "You want big things that you can make your teeth meet in. How would you like to breakfast on elephant?" "What ridiculous nonsense you are talking!" He was getting too wide awake, so I thought I would press him hard. I wonder, I said, what an elephant's soul is like. The effect I designed was obtained. For he at once fell from his high horse and became a child again. I don't want an elephant's soul, or any soul at all, he said. For a few moments, he sat spellbound. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet, with his eyes blazing, and all the signs of intense fear and excitement. To hell with you and your souls, he shouted. Why do you plague me about souls? Haven't I got enough to worry and plague without thinking of souls? He looked so hostile that I thought he was in for another homicidal fit, so I blew my whistle. The instant, however, that I did so, he became calm, and said apologetically, Forgive me, Doctor. I forgot myself. You do not need any help. I'm so worried in my mind that I am apt to be irritable. If you only knew the problem I have to face, and that I am working out, you would pity and tolerate and pardon me. Pray do not put me in a straight waistcoat. I want to think, and I cannot think freely when my body is confined. I'm sure you will understand. He had evidently self-control. So when the attendants came, I told them not to mind. They withdrew. Renfield watched them go. When the door was closed, he said, Dr. Seward, you have been very considerate towards me. Believe me that I am very, very grateful to you. I thought it well to leave him in this mood, and so I came away. There's certainly something to ponder over in this landscape.
I haven't left. I haven't gone anywhere. And I keep losing shit.
It's a story. If one could only get them in proper order. Here they are. Will not mention drinking. Fears the thought of being burdened with the soul of anything. Has no dread of wanting life in the future. Despises the meaner forms of life altogether, though he dreads being haunted by their souls. Logically, all these things point one way. He has assurance of some kind that he will acquire some higher life. He dreads the consequences, the burden of the soul. Then it is a human life he looks to. And the assurance. Merciful God! The Count has been to him, and there is some new scheme of terror afoot. Later, I went after my round to Van Helsing and told him my suspicion. He grew very grave, and after thinking the matter over for a while, I decided to take him to Renfield.
I found another one.
And I did so. As we came to the door, we heard the lunatic within singing gaily, as he used to do in a time which now seems so long ago. When we entered, we saw with amazement that he had spread out his sugar as of old. The flies, lethargic with the autumn, were beginning to buzz into the room. We tried to make him talk of the subject of our previous conversation, but he would not attend. He went on with his singing, just as though we had not been present. He had got a scrap of paper and was folding it into a notebook. We had to come away as ignorant as we went in. It is a curious case indeed. We must watch it tonight.
Lucy's fucking dead, isn't she?
Letter.
Oh, I mean Lucy's dead,
Mitchell,
but
Sons
Nina.
and Candy to Lord Godalming. 1st of October. My lord, we are at all times only too happy to meet your wishes. We beg, with regard to the desire of your lordship, expressed by Mr. Harker on your behalf, to supply the following information concerning the sale and purchase of number 347 Piccadilly. The original vendors are the executors of the late Mr. Archibald Winter Suffield. The purchaser is a foreign nobleman, Count de Ville, who effected the purchase himself, paying the purchase money in notes over the counter, if your lordship will pardon us using so vulgar an expression. Beyond this, we know nothing whatever. We are, my lord, your lordship's humble servants. Mitchell, Sons, and Candy. Dr. Seward's diary. 2nd of October. I placed a man in the corridor last night and told him to make an accurate note of any sound he might hear from Renfield's room, and gave him instructions that if there should be anything strange, he was to call me. After dinner, when we'd all gathered round the fire in the study, Mrs. Harker having gone to bed, we discussed the attempts and discoveries of the day. Harker was the only one who had any results, and we are in great hopes that his clue may be an important one. Before going to bed, I went round to the patient's room and looked in through the observation track. He was sleeping soundly, his heart rose and fell with regular respiration. This morning, the man on duty reported to me that a little after midnight he was restless, and kept saying his prayers somewhat loud. I asked him if that was all. He replied that it was all he heard. There was something about his manner so suspicious that I asked him point blank if he had been asleep. He denied sleep, but admitted to having dozed for a while. It is too bad that men cannot be trusted unless they are watched. Today, Harker is out following up his clue, and Art and Quincy are looking after horses. Goldering thinks that it will be well to have horses always in readiness. When we get the information which we seek, there will be no time to lose. We must sterilize all the imported earth between sunrise and sunset. We shall thus catch the Count at his weakest, and without a refuge to fly to. Van Helsing is off to the British Museum, looking up some authorities on ancient medicine. The old physicians took account of things which their followers do not accept. There is searching for witch and demon cures, which may be useful to us later. I sometimes think we must be all mad, and that we shall wake to sanity in straight waistcoats.
That would be a logical observation.
We have met again. We seem at last to be on the track, and our work of tomorrow may be the beginning of the end. I wonder if Renfield's quiet has anything to do with this. The doings of the Count, that the coming destruction of the monster may be carried to him in some subtle way. If we could only get some hint as to what passed in his mind between the time of my argument with him today and his resumption of fly-catching, it might afford us a valuable clue. He is now seemingly quiet for a spell. Is he? That wild yell seemed to come from his room. The attendant came bursting into my room and told me that Renfield had somehow met with some accident. He had heard him yell, and when he went to him, found him lying on his face on the floor, all covered with blood. I must go at once.
Ah, there we go. Angry pianist. Angry pianist. Got a chunky nose on ya. That's okay.
My pants are
Chapter 21. Dr. Seward's Diary. 3rd of October.
Yeah, there you are.
Let me put down with exactness all that happened, as well as I can remember it, since last I made an entry. Not a detail that I can recall must be forgotten. All calmness, I must proceed. When I came to Renfield's room, I found him lying on the floor on his left side in a glittering pool of blood. When I went to move him, it became at once apparent that he had received some terrible injuries. There seemed none of that unity of purpose between the parts of the body which marks even lethargic sanity. As the face was exposed, I could see that it was horribly bruised, beaten against the floor. Indeed, it was from the face wounds that the pool of blood originated. The attendant who was kneeling beside the body said to me as we turned him over, "I think, sir, his back is broken. See, both his right arm and leg and the whole side of his face are paralyzed." How such a thing could have happened puzzled the attendant beyond measure. He seemed quite bewildered, and his brows were gathered in as he said, "I can't understand the two things. He could mark his face like that by beating his own head on the ground. I saw a young woman do it once at the Eversfield Asylum before anyone could lay hands on her. And I suppose he might have broke his back by falling out of bed if he got in an awkward kink. But for the life of me, I can't imagine how the two things occurred. If his back was broke, He couldn't beat his head. And if his face was like that before the fall out of bed, there would be marks of it. I said to him, "Go to Dr. Van Helsing and ask him to kindly come here at once. I want him without an instant's delay." The man ran off. And within a very few minutes, the professor, in his dressing gown and slippers, appeared. When he saw Renfield on the ground, he looked keenly at him a moment and then turned to me. I think he recognized my thought in my eyes, for he said very quietly, manifestly for the ears of the attendant, "A sad accident. He will need very careful watching and much attention. I shall stay with you myself, but I shall first dress myself. If you are remaining, I shall in a few minutes join you." The patient was now breathing stertorously, and it was easy to see that he had suffered some terrible injury. Van Helsing returned with extraordinary celerity, bearing with him a surgical case. He had evidently been thinking and had his mind made up. For almost before he looked at the patient, he whispered to me, "Send the attendant away. We must be alone with him when he becomes conscious after the operation." So I said, "I think that will do now, Simmons. We have done all that we can at present. You'd better go your round, and Dr. Van Helsing will operate. Let me know instantly if there be anything unusual anywhere." The man withdrew, and we went into a strict examination of the patient. The wounds of the face were superficial. The real injury was a depressed fracture of the skull, extending right up through the motor area. The professor thought a moment and said, "We must reduce the pressure and get back to normal conditions as far as can be. The rapidity of the suffusion shows the terrible nature of his injury. The whole motor area seems affected. The suffusion of the brain will increase quickly, so we must intervene at once, or it may be too late." As he was speaking, there was a soft tapping at the door. I went over and opened it, and found in the corridor without Arthur and Quincy in pajamas and slippers. The former spoke. "I heard your man called up to Dr. Van Helsing and tell him of an accident, so I woke Quincy. Or rather called for him, as he was not asleep. Things are moving too quickly and too strangely for sound sleep for any of us these times. I've been thinking that tomorrow night will not see things as they have been. We'll have to look back and forward a little more than we have done. May we come in?" I nodded and held the door open until they had entered. Then I closed it again. When Quincy saw the attitude and state of the patient and noted the horrible pool on the floor, he said softly, "My God, what has happened to him? Poor devil." I told him briefly, and added that we expected he would recover consciousness after the operation, for a short time at all events. He went at once and sat down on the edge of the bed, with Goldman beside him. We all watched in patience. "We shall wait," said Van Helsing, "just long enough to fix the best spot for trephining, so that we may most quickly and perfectly remove the blood clot, for it is evident that the hemorrhage is increasing." The minutes during which we waited passed with fearful slowness. I had a horrible sinking in my heart, and from Van Helsing's face I gathered that he felt some fear or apprehension as to what was to come. I dreaded the words that Renfield might speak. I was positively afraid to think, but the conviction of what was coming was on me, as I have read of men who have heard the death watch. The poor man's breathing came in uncertain gasps. Each instant he seemed as though he would open his eyes and speak, but then would follow a prolonged stertorous breath, and he would relapse into a more fixed insensibility. In years I was to sick beds and death. The suspense grew upon me. I could almost hear the beating of my own heart, and the blood surging through my temples sounded like blows from a hammer. The silence finally became agonizing. I looked at my companions, one after another, and saw from their flushed faces and damp brows that they were enduring equal torture. There was a nervous suspense over us all, as though overhead some dread bell would peal out powerfully when we should least expect it. At last, there came a time when it was evident that the patient was sinking fast. He might die at any moment. I looked up at the professor and caught his eyes fixed on mine. His face was sternly set as he spoke. "There is no time to lose. His words may be worth many lives. I have been thinking so as I stood here. It may be there is a soul at stake. He shall operate just above the ear." Without another word, he made the operation. For a few moments, the breathing continued to be stertorous. Then there came a breath so prolonged that it seemed as though it would tear open his chest. Suddenly his eyes opened and became fixed in a wild, helpless stare. This was continued for a few moments. Then it softened into a glad surprise, and from the lips came a sigh of relief. He moved convulsively, and as he did so, said, "I'll be quiet, Doctor. Tell them to take off the straight waistcoat. I've had a terrible dream. It has left me so weak that I can't move. What's wrong with my face? It feels all swollen, and it smarts dreadfully." He tried to turn his head, but even with the effort his eyes seemed to grow glassy again, so I gently put it back. Then Van Helsing said in a quiet, grave tone, "Tell us your dream, Mr. Renfield." As he heard the voice, his face brightened through its mutilation, and he said, "That is Dr. Van Helsing. How good it is of you to be here. Give me some water. My lips are dry, and I shall try to tell you. I dreamed." He stopped and seemed fainting. I called quietly to Quincy. "The brandy, it is in my study. Quick." He flew and returned with a glass, the decanter of brandy, and a carafe of water. We moistened the parched lips, and the patient quickly revived. It seemed, however, that his
Blood and
had
brandy.
been working in the interval, for when he was quite conscious, he looked at me piercingly, with an agonized confusion which I shall never forget, and said, "I must not deceive myself. It was no dream, but all a grim reality." And his eyes were
Alright, I think we're done. I'm done.
as they caught up.
We're gonna listen to them die next day. Okay, UFO convention tomorrow. I can't do this. I got a little UFO bat, a little Martian bat, and he glows in the dark. So, whew, I just need another 50 of you. Alrighty. We'll figure this all out another day. Good night, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. If you did, and I will see you another night. Night. Oh, shit. We're good. We're fine. Everything's normal. Oopsie, wrong button. There we go.